project.
Email for you.
We're getting connected.
Are we?
It's on the screen.
Mr. Zastapul, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Outstanding. Mr. Cluck, can you hear us, sir? You? Mr. Cluck, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can.
Outstanding. Okay, so we couldn't hear from you or Mr. Benson, so we just passed your agenda items. You're good to go.
Oh, okay.
Easiest meeting you've ever had.
Very easy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. Basically, quick summary, just so you know what we talked about. Commissioner Steen and Commissioner Pollack requested some amendments to the presentation, and you appeased both of them very well. So well done, and Godspeed, and have a good day.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we'll keep you posted.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. On to item 2, Mr. Zastapul. Now that we can get people hearing us, you are up to bat.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Today I'm here before you with some a couple of change order requests, but prior to that, I wanted to give a report to the board on kind of the state of the communications project for Cass County. For those, there might be, I believe, at least one member that's not aware of some of the background. Briefly, back in 2018, November, the contract was signed with Motorola for the communications project. And in that project, there's kind of two elements. The part for Motorola, which was a little over 12.5 million, and then there were some non-Motorola costs, a little under 1.4. Just to give you the big picture is about $13.89 million for the communication project. I want to first of all start off with just kind of a high level on the project. Things are pretty much on schedule. The COVID-19 stuff has kind of set us back maybe about 2 to 4 weeks. Originally, final acceptance was scheduled mid-January of 2021. So, you know, it's going to be pushed out a little bit, but currently that's not bad, all things considered. The project, as far as for the work, the civil work is pretty much done except for some minor punch list items, and this includes the 3 new towers at Alice, Buffalo, and Gardner. The microwave work is pretty much complete. 5 out of the 6 links are active. The final link, they're anticipated to come back here. There's an acceptance plan, test plan that has to be put in place yet, but so once that's done, they'll be coming back and finish that final path and do the acceptance testing. All of the 9 sites within the project have been installed cold. 4 out of the 9 sites are kind of in a revert operation, meaning they're up and running, but they're just not all talking to each other yet. Expect the metro sites to be connected to the core equipment probably by the end of this month or maybe early next month. So that's kind of as far as for the work within the project. The budgetary status of the project, the Motorola, the infrastructure piece within the approximately 12.5 mil was around 4.8 million. About 76% of that infrastructure costs have been invoiced by Motorola. To date, we've got about this commission has approved about $127,000 worth of change orders, which is about 2.6% of the infrastructure cost. The other portion of the Motorola piece is the subscriber radios, which at the time of contract signing was about 1,641 radios, estimated to be at 7.625 million. within the project now, we've updated the radio inventory with the agencies, and the number of radios has increased up to about 1,830. But due to some project and budget management within the project, along with some, looking at enhanced offerings from Motorola, we expect the radio subscriber cost will still be below the contract amount. I'd say conservatively about $500,000 below that 7.625. The subscriber radios, I anticipate the the first block of radios, probably be ordering them here late this month, or probably more realistically here in September. And so with that being said, well, I guess what I'll preface the subscriber radios, we're doing 4 blocks of radios. Again, when you look at 1,800 radios, and just due to the sheer logistics of installation and programming and so on, that's why they're being divided into blocks. The non-Motorola expenses in the project, again, just the quick recap, 1.385 mil, about 56% of that has been invoiced or received and been paid by the county. So with that being said, as far as for the state of the project and kind of in the budget does not have let's say a specific contingency line item, but the original budgeting that was done in this project was conservative. It was some built-in leeway, and knowing that, just like any large project, there's going to be some twists and turns, and we've had a few of those as noted by some previously approved change orders, but really nothing's been out of line, and we're still within budget overall. So with that being said, I'll kind of conclude my report, or pause and open up for questions that anybody might have before we touch on the change orders and then the network design quote.
Commissioners, any questions regarding the overall concept of the project? If not, just best we'll jump into the item, please.
All right, thank you. Again, you have before you three requests. 2 are framed as change orders. I'll start first as change order 9. These are additional expenses that were required due to the locating the antenna systems on water tanks. I was able to get this negotiated down, believe it or not. And basically it just has to do with, again, being water tanks. They're really particular on how things are attached to the tank to prevent corrosion. And then also there was an issue with they want the antennas painted to match the tanks and so on. So this work encompassed 2 water tanks, 2 of the sites, which is 32nd and 64th Avenue in Fargo, and $80,600 is the cost of that change order. Mr. Chair, would you like me to just run down the rest of them and then
Just go through everything and then we'll ask questions, sir. Please.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item in the agenda is the network design quote. Again, just a refresher that a lot of the several of the sites in the metro area are connected via fiber. The project has a budget line item for connectivity, and we've received a quote from Motorola to do this network layer inside the project. Again, as I mentioned, there is a budget line item for connectivity in the non-Motorola piece, but my proposal is, and I'll summarize this later, is that this element be funded out of that budgetary pot per se. And then the last issue is the 45th Street water tank. We needed to enhance some grounding there, and as well as there's some additional work that had to be done on the tank for structural design and so on that was outside of the scope of the contract. Had to add some entry ports and things of that sort. with that being said, I guess it's my recommendation to the board or to the county commissioners that they approve these change orders or this, the quote, requested, and I guess I'll open it up for any discussions that folks might have.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Steen.
Thank you for your description. I have a question on the, so there's 3 items here, and the first item, 80,600, is a change order, correct?
That is correct.
And the third item, 26,683, is a change order.
That is correct.
And now explain to me what the second item is for 140,000. That's just part of the normal contract. We're just funding it differently.
Yes, I would guess I wouldn't frame it as it's not part of the contract. It's part of the non-Motorola budget, but just the vendor of choice in this piece happens to be Motorola. So it was a budgetary line item, and it just happens to be Motorola as the vendor to fund or to provide this hardware and services. Let's be clear.
There's no significant cost change in that line item.
Correct. That still fits within that budget line item, even in the non-Motorola. Correct.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So were you blindsided by City of Fargo's request?
I would, blindsided probably isn't the proper word for it. It's been challenging. There's no doubt about it. It's been a difficult target to hit. And to be honest, it's something that I'm going to note for future future projects, because it's just past experience hasn't proven this challenging. Let's put it that way.
Said that awfully nice. I was blindsided by it. Mr. Sessel, my question for you is it, I mean, it is what it is, right? We don't own the water towers. We're sort of held captive by our neighbor, who is not really our neighbor, it's our peer, and frankly, you know, our literal figure neighborhood neighbor. What we're wondering, or what I'm wondering is, are these requests reasonable?
I believe so. Yes, I've reviewed them intently, and if there's any place that I can counter or whatever, I've done so as the project manager on behalf of Cass County. So you're kind of seeing the final product, but it's, yeah, like I say, in today's world, challenging is a word that's been used quite often for a lot of things.
Okay, I'll let you be nicer than me.
Okay.
Sure, is any other questions, concerns, discussion? Commissioner Pollock.
I move to approve change order number 9 in the amount of $80,600 for the design and installation requirements associated with the antenna systems located on the water tanks in Fargo. The network design quote in the amount of $140,193.38 for the non-Motorola expense, and the 45th Street water tank quote in the amount of $26,683.98 for the antenna system location requirements and additional engineering work outside the scope of the contract.
Thank you. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Sherling? Brightling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Mr. Saspel, anything else, sir?
Nope, that's it for today. So at the end, thank you, everybody.
Outstanding work. Thank you for your help. Appreciate your description and appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Item 3, Cass County Alertus System. Mr. Pajniak, I see you're up to bat here. Your turn now.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you for allowing me this opportunity as informational points regarding the Cass Clay Alerts system. And as I was up here during the budget session, you may or may not recall that Commissioner Brightling had asked on behalf of his better half about a question: when is this going to occur? I told him shortly, and so I thought, you know what, let's come in front of the commission and answer a few of the questions that not only we have been hearing from the general public when it comes to the transfer over to Cass Clay Alerts, but some of the efforts that we've been taking as emergency managers, both in Cass and Clay County, to launch this system. August 4th, we held a press briefing over at the Moorhead LEC. Sheriff Johnner and Sheriff, I just drew a blank. We're in Clay County. Thank you. Sheriff Empting were guest speakers at that press briefing, along with the emergency management crew from both sides of the river. As you may recall, the people that launched this are Red River Regional Dispatch when it comes to an emergency notification, and they serve both counties, so both counties are involved in this. Cass Clay Alerts obviously has some of its own branding. In the handout that I shared with you, I think you'll see something that looks just like this. We will have this forever. This is ours, Cass Clay Alerts. So the general public will certainly start to identify with that project or that logo, and we hope that, you know, people easily identify it as something that can notify them in the event of a disaster. Without me rambling on and going over every little point, we had some assistance by a technical team with the City of Fargo, as they are part of Red River Regional Dispatch Governing Board, in putting together a video which incorporates a lot of the different communities that are involved and the different disciplines that use this. So with Terry's help from IT, I'd like to play the video, and I think it's loaded for everybody to watch. It's done very well. The video's good. The launcher might not be.
It's Tracy Peters.
We went to a new system because we found that the Everbridge software provides us a lot more flexibility, a lot more options. So when you sign up for Cass Clay Alerts, there's a couple of great flexibility and benefits that you can have with it. One is that you can get them via text message, you can get them via email, you can get them through phone calls or your landline or through mobile apps. It used to be that you could only have one address associated with you. With this one, you have the choice of adding up to 5 addresses. So like some people like me that might work in West Fargo but live in South Fargo, I may want to get 2 different alerts depending if I'm at work or if I'm at home. You may also add your children's school. That way you can get notifications for every place that you might potentially be.
Any community member that can stay on top of what's going on in their community, especially if it's a situation that affects them or their family, is going to benefit from this. So it's not just going to be pertaining to storms, whether it be a severe thunderstorm, whether it be hail coming through, whether it be a tornado. You know, from a law enforcement perspective, it keeps people informed as to what we're out there doing in an emergent situation. And I know personally, I've had people contact and say, hey, you know, why wasn't I notified, or why did I not get an alert? Why didn't you guys stop by? And that's the first question I always ask is, are you signed up for the program?
From the engineering and public works side, we've used that previously during flood events with enhanced capabilities. We'll likely even use it more to get those critical messages out to property owners. And so we would strongly encourage people to sign up.
So we are going to switch over to the new system in August here as far as having people sign up for it. And then we will terminate the old Code Red system by the end of August. So September 1st, we will go purely on the Cass Clay Alerts. And that'll be the only system that we will send out notifications on.
You know, I think it's just really important to know that even if you were signed up for Code Red, that you have to re-sign up for Cass Clay Alerts, and that it's just a really good system in place that will notify you of things that you need to be aware of from a health standpoint, from an emergency standpoint, citywide. It's a good idea.
You know, much like the system that we had in place prior with Code Red, you know, Cass Clay Alerts is only going to be, you know, an effective program if people sign up. So it's very simplistic from my understanding. It's obviously extremely beneficial, you know, and I would just always advise people to take that time, brief time frame that it is, and sign up for it so you can stay in the know.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Chair, if I may continue, one of the questions that we have had from the general public, why can't you just transfer that data from the Code Red system into this system so we don't have to re-register? That by far is the biggest question. Because under Code Red, we don't own the data. We have no control over the data. Once a citizen enters that, It's solely the proprietary ownership, you want to call it, of Code Red. So we had no control. So you could call our office and say, hey, I've signed up for Code Red. Can you help me out? No, we couldn't. They had to call Code Red. Now we can do it locally. And it is a great benefit to be able to manage the system that way. Talked about the handouts, numerous radio interviews were conducted the week of that. The flag, KFGO, felt like a celebrity for a little bit. FirstLink was instrumental in enrolling people. At one point at the peak of this, after we sent out a message, they were doing 50 enrollments every minute. They had to call back extra staff to get people on board for the new system. Further efforts to continue the momentum and get people familiar with this will certainly be through community groups. I'm heading out to Buffalo tomorrow night. Our county budget information that is sent out. I've been working with finance office, and we're going to include some information very similar to this so that everybody in Cass County gets it. Those big vertical or electronic message boards down at the lights, Cheyenne, the veterans one, they're going to display, occasionally sign up for Cass Clay alerts. The libraries in both West Fargo, City of Fargo, are going to include bookmarks and put those into books that are checked out. And utility bills over in the City of West Fargo are going to include a message. So we're just going to keep people aware of how to go about this, get them thinking, and hopefully, it's something that they never have to cash in on. But quite frankly, as citizens of Cass and Clay County, it's already paid for. It's a free service. One last question, one last point that I wanted to make. The question came up at the press conference. Why is this any different than any other app? After visiting with the media person that was talking about that or asked that question, they were talking about a weather app. And we hear a lot about weather apps, and you can get them a dime a dozen. And do they do a similar thing? Yeah, they do. Except you can't tailor some of those weather apps to the hours which you want to sleep. If you're somebody that sleeps during the middle of the day because you work shift work, this app can do that. The other thing that this one does on a weather app, as opposed to people thinking they're safe with that, if there is an active shooter in your neighborhood outside the courthouse, you're going to get the alert if you're signed up on this. That weather app's not going to do you a hill of beans. It'll tell you it's sunny outside, right? So I think the person asking the question was made aware of the benefit of Cass Clay alerts. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Commissioners, if you have any question, I'd be glad to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Schmaltz. I was digging through my phone to find my text, because I got my ping and knew you'd been at work, so appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? If not, Mr. Pochak, thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
On to item number 4. We'll start with 4A. I think that we'll ask Mr. Dodds to speak first, or Mr. Wilson, do you want to start?
Mr. Chair, I certainly could defer to Mr. Dodds. We've been working closely on this process for a number of months now, and we gave you a little bit more background last meeting into some of the work and the information that's been developed prior to bringing actual agenda items forward. And I think Mr. Dodds is prepared to run through that process and then run through the specific items.
Perfect. Mr. Dodds.
Thank you, commissioners and Mr. Wilson. If you recall, last week, or 2 weeks ago, we were here, similar type of action. Today, we originally had 9 requests for you, a variety of different property owners that we've tried to negotiate with. I am happy to report that 2 of those 9 we have reached a deal with. One of them was already a deal done before the agenda went out. And then the second one, item 4F, we did reach and have a signed purchase agreement with them. And so A little bit of good news before we maybe get into some of the harder parts of the agenda here, but we did reach an agreement with that parcel, and so I guess if it's okay, we'll just sort of gloss over that one when it comes up. With that, I guess brief introduction, I believe the chairman of the Cass County Joint Board is with us virtually, Dan Jacobson, and I know last time he said a few words and maybe a little bit repetitive, but I think there's a few new audience members, some property owners here today that were not with us 2 weeks ago. And so if Dan, if you're out there and if you wanted to share any initial words, that would be great.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here. Dan is on the call. What I'm wondering is, again, Mr. Dodds, you touched on it. The reason I'd like you to sort of go over again what some of us in the room have heard is we have a lot of people online, a lot of people in the room that weren't party to anything we talked about last commission meeting. So while it may be redundant for some of us, I apologize. I think it's critical that everybody sort of kept up to speed as to what transpired prior as well. So maybe a little bit less, but I'll shut up there. Mr. Jacobson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Peterson and fellow commissioners. I'm not going to add a lot today. Like Eric said, we're making some progress. We're really trying to negotiate. Our land agents are working hard, and I'm just here to answer any questions if that'll help. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe I'll jump in and give just a short version of the overview that I gave last time, and then I'll turn things to Sean Fredericks to explain a little bit more about the statutory requirements, and then we can pick it up from there. Again, maybe a bit repetitious, but just for everybody's awareness, the Cass County, much like the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, are members of the Diversion Authority. The Cass County Joint Board was assigned the responsibility for acquiring property rights in North Dakota for the project. And so we've been working on that for a number of years. Some of these acquisitions started back in probably 2012 or 2013. And then we really started ramping the program up in a more planned or robust fashion through 2016 and 2017. We had the injunction against the project, and so in 2018 there was a little bit of activity with land acquisition, but we sort of put on ice. As we got through the permitting process, the acquisition work continued. So in that acquisition program, the Joint Board is taking the responsibility for reviewing purchase agreements and reviewing the acquisition summaries that come forth. In order to do those acquisitions, the board has retained a group of appraisers. We did an RFP for appraisers several years ago. We have 7 different firms that are on board. All of them are qualified to do work in North Dakota. We found that our appraisers do a real nice job. Once the appraiser is done, they submit their draft report to a review appraiser. The review appraiser, John Olbeck, is on board virtually with us today as well. John has done appraisal reviews for the Corps for a number of years, and then he retired from the Corps, and now he's doing that on a consulting basis for the project. That appraisal gets done, the board authorizes.
As a gentle reminder, if you're not speaking, could you please mute your line? As you are feverishly typing away, Mr. Dodds, please continue.
So he's taking notes of what I'm saying.
And that's okay too.
And so once the appraisal is done and reviewed, the Joint Board authorizes an offer of just compensation based on the appraised amount. And that offer then is submitted to the property owner, usually through a land agent. And so we have 4 different firms that have land agents. These are right-of-way professionals who do this type of role for a living. Terry's grabbing a remote. And so the land agents present the offer, and that really begins the negotiating process with the property owner. And as you may have seen, some of the acquisition summaries, you'll note that the contact has been going on for years in many of these cases. And so there's been, in many cases, real fruitful dialogue back and forth. And frankly, we're just, can't come to agreement on a price, or maybe there's been fruitful discussions, but we, for whatever reason, they haven't reached an agreement. And so the Joint Board ends up following a statutory process that's laid out in legislation. That was drafted in 2017, and Sean may talk a little bit about that. So today, what the Cass County Joint Board is here for is they have reached a point in the statutory process where they need to ask the county for permission to proceed. And so the county's role isn't necessarily to come in and sort of wear the hat of becoming the negotiator. The county's role is to determine whether or not the joint board has followed all the statutory steps or not. And so in the binder and the packets of information that you've seen in front of you, you'll see a table of contents for each one of these properties, followed by a checklist that identifies all the statutory requirements. And if you go down the checklist, hopefully you'll see that we've met all those. Following the checklist is a brief summary of the negotiations. Following that is a copy of all the letters and the official correspondence that has been sent over the past several months to the property owners. And so we're here today because the procurement of the P3 developer is ongoing, and construction is expected to begin in 2021. And so we've reached a point where we're at, unfortunately, a bit of an impasse with these acquisitions, and we're asking the county to authorize the next steps. One thing I would just say about the properties here in your packet, all, I guess, 7, there were 9 again, but there's 7 different actions in front of you. All of the properties associated with these 7 actions are necessary for the footprint of the diversion channel. There are obviously various aspects of the project. All of these properties here are for the diversion channel. So maybe I'll pause there, and unless there's any questions, I would maybe ask Mr. Fredericks to talk a little bit about the statutory requirements.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Dodds before we jump on to Mr. Fredericks? If not, Fredericks, share your thoughts, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the commission, I appreciate the opportunity to appear here today electronically. I think Eric gave a very nice introduction in terms of where we are and the process that we've been utilizing. You'll recall a couple of weeks ago, I provided a detailed analysis of what led us to the statute that we have now in terms of water resource districts and our eminent domain authority. I won't go into that excruciating detail today, but I will provide a little bit of background, mainly just to provide some context, both as a reminder for the commission and so that the landowners in attendance have some understanding of what the commission, what the Cass County Joint Board is asking the commission to do today. Just as a reminder, again, in terms of context, the statute we're talking about is North Dakota Century Code 61-16.1-09 subdivision 2. That is a water resource district statute, and it's the eminent domain statute. Some people call it quick take eminent domain. And the 2017 legislature significantly modified the statute, and I just want to provide just a brief reminder of some of the background that led to that modification, and just to give the landowners who are present an idea of what it is we're dealing with. So the Cass County Joint Board submitted requests to the county commission to utilize the Water Resource Districts Authority under that statute. And in 2017, the legislature modified the statute for a number of reasons, but one of the primary reasons was to prohibit water resource districts from rushing to quick take, essentially, and also to ensure that water boards were not utilizing quick take as a heavy stick in negotiations. They, being the legislature, wanted to ensure that landowners have a fair shake in terms of negotiations. And the statute that we're left with is a fairly detailed process that water resource districts must comply with before they even get to this point. And as Eric noted, we've gone through months and in many cases years in terms of negotiations with these individual landowners. And we have followed those statutes very closely. Again, it's a fairly arduous process. And I think that's fair in terms of what the legislature was trying to do. They wanted to ensure that water resource districts weren't rushing to quick take, and we are certainly not in a position to be able to do that at this point. And I can assure you the Joint Board and the water resource districts in Cass County were not water resource districts that utilize quick take as heavy stick in negotiations, but unfortunately there were some. My apologies, I muted accidentally. As individual landowner packets demonstrate that advanced engineering supplied for you, we've been in negotiations with most of these landowners for several months and in some cases years. Unfortunately, we just haven't arrived at a mutually acceptable resolution. This does not mean, because we're here today, that does not mean that negotiations are concluded. And in fact, if the commission does grant Cass County Joint Board's request to proceed under 61-16.1-09 sub 2, that certainly does not mean that negotiations have concluded. And in fact, we absolutely want to ensure that negotiations continue. In terms of what the county commission, what we're asking the county commission to do today, the statute provides that the county commission where the property is located must approve use of quick take eminent domain before the Water Resource District can utilize it. And as a reminder, the 2017 legislation, the idea was that the county commission appoints the water resource districts, and the legislature wanted to ensure that your commission is comfortable that the water resource district has in fact jumped through all the statutory hoops before we exercise this important authority. The legislature was not trying to place you in the position of the water resource district, or in other words, the negotiator. The objective is not to make you, as the commission, the new negotiator with the landowner. The objective was not to make you, the commission, responsible for determining whether or not the appraisal that the water resource district acquired, whether that is fair. The objective was not to make you consider any other legal issues that landowners might have. One of them might be, water resource districts should not be able to utilize this authority in terms of structures or items like that. Those are legal arguments. The county commission is not burdened with the obligation to consider those issues. Your sole burden, if you will, from the legislature is to ensure that we have in fact followed the negotiation process set out in that statute. And again, as your packets demonstrate, we have in fact done that, and we did provide a checklist. And in your packets, you'll have contact logs from the land agents. You have copies of all the letters that we provided to the landowners, and you'll see as you go down this checklist that we can in fact verify that we followed all of these steps. And really that is your statutory charge, to determine whether or not we followed those steps. And again, not to determine if the price is fair, not to present an opportunity to negotiate today, but rather just to ensure, as the county commission, as the entity that appoints the members of the Cass County Joint Board, to ensure that we follow these statutory steps. To the extent you want me to go through all of those, I certainly could. We went through that in some detail at our last meeting, but again, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background in terms of why we are here today and some of the issues that may come up that arose at the August 3rd meeting. For example, some of the landowners wanted to discuss the appraisal and why they didn't think it was fair. And those are certainly fair arguments, but those are for the joint board to negotiate, and that's it. To the extent that we're not able to come to a mutually acceptable resolution, and of course, as Eric noted, we're certainly hoping to do so. But to the extent that we're not able to do that, that's for a court to decide. The landowners certainly have their due process rights under this process, but fortunately, the Cass County Commission does not have to determine whether or not the appraisals are accurate or whether or not a particular parcel is ag or developable property. Those are not the issues before you today. Again, just the county commission only has to determine if we have verified that we followed the requisite steps. And so I just wanted to make sure that the landowners in attendance today understand the role that the commission plays. I know we've gone through this in some detail at the last meeting, but if you have any questions about the statutory process, I'd be happy to answer those.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Fredericks? All right, sir. Anything else to add?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dodds.
So there are 7 actions in front of you today. If you would like, I could certainly give a preview of each one. I know we do have a few property owners here, and I know you probably want to offer them a chance to speak as
Yep,
well.
I'd rather go individually.
Okay.
And just, so
if
do
you
4A, and then if the owner's here, they can speak.
Sure.
4B, C, D, and continue all the way through, so everybody has a chance, whether they're
Okay.
here or virtual.
Sure. So 4A, Mr. Gust
Without,
and
sorry, Mr. Edson, without objection, commissioners, is that? Proceed, sir, sorry.
Sure.
Thank you.
So 4A, Mr. Gus and Haskins, right? Sorry, are here with us today. So let me just give a brief intro of this. So in your packet, you should see a number of things. Page 5 of the packet for the Gust property shows you a map. They have a sort of, I don't know, panhandle-shaped parcel. You can see the handle of the panhandle is a grass airstrip. And you can see that the western edge of that grass airstrip is impacted by the footprint of the channel. And so we have appraised the impacts by the project. We've actually had 2 appraisals done on this parcel. And the first one, the property owners challenged the appraisal. Well, they probably challenged both of them, I guess, to be fair, but they certainly challenged the first one. And we recognized there may have been some flaws. And so we did have a new appraisal done. On page 4, I want to draw your attention. This negotiating summary is referencing the first appraisal, which is wrong. If you look back, sorry to keep you flipping, but on page 6 is the offer letter. So the value that we've offered based on the appraisal is $134,500, and that's based on the second appraisal that was done in 2019. And the basis for that appraisal was looking at the parcel, highest and best use. There was some determination. I believe it's 1.56 acres that are impacted. And again, it comes out to valuation of $134,500. The property owner has been pretty consistent, wanting substantially more than that. And I think Mr. Gus can speak to that on his own. And so frankly, we've just sort of been at odds over value, and that's what led us here today. So unless there's any questions for me, okay.
Mr. Gus, Zoom? Yes. Welcome to your courthouse, sir. Share with us your thoughts regarding whether these guys have been talking to you or not.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners. Yeah, this thing went off the rails pretty early in the process. We run an aerial spraying business, my wife and I do, and this runway is very important to our business. At the time we acquired it, it was before the diversion was a dream of anybody, and we had to move out of where we were working at the time. So we quickly put up a structure at the West Fargo Municipal Airport because it takes 5 to 7 years to get a grass strip developed and ready for the kind of traffic that you use aerial spraying on. I understand this is a statutory hearing, but I'm getting to the statutory part of it, so bear with me. So the district has accused us of not needing to use this strip in our business, and that we are just claiming that to get more money out of them. So I don't know how I had the foresight in 2007 to acquire this land for $120,000 and start the process of building a runway when no diversion was ever thought of. And actually, one of your commissioners here got a letter from the county when I platted it that there was going to be an aerial spraying strip there. Mr. Pollack was an adjacent landowner. In fact, he commented, I think he commented that you don't want to see a passenger service working out of there. So I'd be happy to know United Airlines has not approached me for that being a hub. So I'm not sure where the district got this idea or where it's even their job to determine what is essential for my wife's and my business. And I think that's where this thing went off. And the first appraisal reflects that. And especially, and this is the only appraisal they've been sending me through this is this one. So I assumed everything here was based on this. I understand the price they gave me was based on the second appraisal.
And that's the initial we're talking about. You can't see Mr.
Right.
34,000, which is incorrect. It was amended to the one. Yep.
Correct. But I don't know if you have copies of this, but especially on the project impact, the nonsense that is in this thing is just, it's unbelievable. But this appraiser saw it in his infinite wisdom to go on an online chat forum with pilots to determine how much runway an aerial sprayer needs to take off. And I mean, there are people claiming that 1,500 feet is a comfortable length, 2,000 feet is plenty. And this appraiser, based on that conversation, decided that there would be no problem with the amount you guys will leave us. But he didn't mention to any of these people there's going to be a 30-foot berm followed by a 60-foot ditch off one end of it. I have about 450 aerial sprayers lined up who would testify that it's nonsense. I'm sure you don't want to hear from them. The other part of this that's a flat-out lie is that he put on here that there is another airstrip used by a crop duster out of Williston that has a runway that measures about 1,315 feet that is located in Section 16, Township 155, North Range 101 West. This runway was about 1,935 feet in length prior to an acquisition by the NDOT for a bypass highway. This is out by Williston. It took me 15 minutes to find this guy. His airstrip's on the sectional charts, phone number's there, called him up. He's never been an aerial sprayer, never let an aerial sprayer go off that strip. So where this appraiser got this information, I mean, this is nothing more than fraud in my mind. It's a lie. And then, further down, he states the subject property does not have a hangar. This suggests to me that there's another location where the aircraft is stored. It has been stated that the subject property owner runs his business out of the West Fargo Municipal Airport 2.5 miles southeast of the subject. So clearly the district has been informing these appraisers that this airstrip is not necessary to our business. The second appraisal followed that. The second appraisal never mentioned anywhere in there that I was an aerial applicator, and only appraised it based on it being a private grass runway. Now, what's been offered there, I mean, it's less than a third of what you got into it. Again, it's not your job to determine that. But what I'm saying is that the process that they used is extremely flawed. They based a lot of their things on what I see as fraudulent information. And I've invited them many times out to the West Fargo Airport to show them how inappropriate that place is for running an aerial spraying business. Why it's much better to be run off of private strip. They've refused to come out. Time and time again I've done that, and nobody is interested. They seem to have this narrative that they won't go away from. And every appraiser, they know nothing about this. If you read that second appraisal, well, we can't find any runways that were purchased. Ironically, there was one that Cap 1020 or Cap 2020, Cap X 2020 line took right out by Saban. It's an aerial sprayer. He had 2 strips. They took one, paid him $1 million, still has his second strip, selling his business as we speak. You guys, I get this one taken from me, I got nothing to sell because nobody will work out the West Fargo Airport. And so I think everything they based their data on has been flawed. And I don't think they followed proper procedure. I don't think their offers were fair and just. And I think they have some kind of built-in bias that they're just not, because they refuse any information we give them. We actually, after the March 31st letter, we wrote a letter back saying we refused to work with Ken Helvey because we believe he's behaved unethically. And that it was very difficult. We had a tremendous amount of physical evidence we wanted to present to show them our position. And we couldn't do this over a Zoom meeting. I mean, how many disasters have we had in Zoom meetings? And we got no answer from them. The district didn't even answer our request, our letter. Got nothing. crickets. I sent both an email and a letter. So I'm feeling that, they're not checking all the boxes in our case. Now, what Mr. Helby did, and this is when this thing went way south on us. We hired an appraiser to dispute the appraisal they gave us. And to find one that isn't touched by this project, it's almost impossible. I called the guy in Barnesville thinking I was far enough away. Well, you got to go a lot further than that to find somebody. He told me of a guy who was a pilot down in Rapid City, near Spearfish, I believe. John Wittes was his name. So I called him up. He said, yeah, big talker, as some pilots are. What I find is that there's guys who talk about flying, there's guys who fly. And this guy talked a lot about it. Some of his expertise was a little off. But I sent him copies of this. He said, this is nuts. This is just insane. Paid him $500 to come up here. Came up here, looked, yeah. He says, this is ridiculous. This appraiser doesn't know what he's doing. I said, that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear. Well, in the process, I was contacted again by one of Helby's associates, Nicole Rose. What's her name? Anyway, I said, no, I'm in the process of hiring an appraiser to dispute what you've given me. Oh, she said, who's that? I said, his name is John Wittes. He's from down by Rapid City. And I thought this was an open and honest process. Well, a couple days later, I get an email from John. Nicole contacted me and hired me to do an appraisal for their firm. So I'll be coming back up there to take a look at your runway. I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. What? I said, I've got the emails here if anybody would like to see them. And I said, I don't want you to give me an appraisal. I want you to dispute what they've given us and show how far off this thing is. And, he said, well, I was under the understanding that you and Nicole had solved your differences and that this was fine. I said, no, and I'm in the middle of spray season. I'm trying to do this stuff. And same thing with right now. It's crazy how busy we are, and we have to get out of the airplane and come and do this crap. It's really frustrating. And the same thing was going on there, and eventually the guy quit on me and refused to do it. So, it hasn't gone any better since then. And I'm telling you, I don't think they're following law here when you talk about fair and just compensation and even identifying the property for what it is. They refuse to do that. Miss anything?
Any questions, commissioners? Any questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Dodds, I have questions. As you might imagine, some pretty heavy accusations. What's your side?
I don't know that
I don't know that you're the person, whoever you feel is best to speak to this, please have them
Well,
tell us what's going on here.
Let me just share a few things, commissioners. So I think Mr. Gust has been consistent all along that he had purchased this property for intentions of putting a aerial spraying business out there. The second appraisal does look at the highest and best use of the property. And in the appraiser's conclusion, again, this is an appraiser that we've used on all sorts of properties for the project. I would contend that they're one of our better appraisers that we've used. And their conclusion was that the highest and best use for the property after the project was ag land. They recognized that the shorter runway would have limited use, and if you had the right plane and the right conditions, maybe not for aerial spraying, but for other purposes, you could probably get by with a shorter runway, but it's likely that it would be better to be valued as agricultural land after the project. And so that was the highest and best use conclusion from the appraiser. Unfortunately, we're in a situation here where we have unique properties, and I guess I certainly have to trust Mr. Gust's statements that he bought this with intentions of moving his spraying business out there. But as we've hired appraisers to go out and, look at this. We did not tell the appraiser what to assume. It's their job. We identify the property. They meet with the property owner. They do all their diligence of reviewing, researching what's going on in that property. They've come to the conclusion that the after value would be better by highest and best use. I would also just, maybe not to go into the details of some of the comments made, but there's been sort of a history here of suggesting that we have so bad intentions on the project, and there's obviously some allegations thrown around, and seems to be some mistrust, I guess. And I guess I'm here to tell you that from my vantage point and all of the people on the project that I'm working with, we take these acquisitions very seriously. We want to pay property owners what it's worth for their land, and we have a very rigorous process that we've been following. And unfortunately, here we're at odds. I'd like to say we were close to making a deal, but frankly, we're not. Ken Helvey is the land agent that has been working with them. I can attest that Ken is a very ethical dude, and I've worked with him quite a bit for quite a few years on this parcel. I've been out to the Gus property myself. John Albrecht, the review appraiser, has been out there with me. Ken's been there many times as well. And so I guess that's just a few comments that I would have for you.
I guess I'm less concerned, not to be disrespectful, I'm less concerned about the value because that's not within our purview. I am concerned about, maybe this isn't the best word, so I apologize, the underhandedness that was implied, meaning we're trying to go in and, again, taking you at your word, right? You have no proof of this, regarding, he goes out and finds someone to work with, and we go give him some money.
I have emails.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't. So I believe you. I'm just putting myself in your situation for half a second. You want to talk about that for me for a second?
Yeah, and I might ask Ken to help me with a few things here if I misstep. But if I recall right, this was during a time when the first appraisal missed the mark, and I think we acknowledge that. Mr. Gus brought up several issues of that first appraisal, and so we were trying to find. He had asked, "Do you have a better appraiser out there?" And so we queried our appraisers who had been contracted through the joint board. How many of you have experience doing airstrip appraisals? Didn't have a whole lot of success. The Patchen Mesner, the appraiser that did the second appraisal, we felt was very qualified and could take this on. But in that process of trying to identify who a qualified appraiser was, we asked Mr. Gust who, he might have any suggestions or recommendations. And so we were trying to find a good qualified appraiser at the same time. And so when he offered a name, we thought, great, let's go reach out to them, hire them, get it done. It's been the project obligation to hire the appraisers in the past. And so that's kind of uniform practice as the joint board hires the appraiser. The appraisers are independent. They might get paid directly by the project, but they're independent. They have a duty and an ethical requirement to do their work independently. Again, it gets reviewed and then submitted as a value of just compensation.
Commissioner Steen.
Thank you. Just a question for somebody who may be able to answer this. Is the land currently being used as a crop spraying airstrip?
On occasion.
Excuse me?
On occasion.
Please, yeah, I'm sorry. We have enough people online where.
The West Fargo Airport is in what's called the Class D airspace of the Fargo Airport. It's a 5 nautical mile radius around Fargo. When the Blue Angels come to town, the Thunderbirds, the president, they close that airspace, and I cannot operate out of there. Numerous occasions I've had the local Dakota Ag, Les Staples is on my witness list. They brought a truck out for me and helped me actually load. They supply me with chemical. So that's another reason that the strip is so inappropriate. And one thing I did forget to mention is, and I have this on video, at the last West Fargo City Commission meeting, a commissioner got up and railed against the West Fargo Airport and felt they should stop funding there. And in fact, it's on the agenda for tonight. I'm having to head over there and beg for my life after this meeting. So, I'm in a tough spot. And I'd also like to, the second appraiser didn't mention anything about aerial spraying activity on that strip. I think there's a difference between some guy's grass strip out in his back 40 compared to an airstrip that is built strictly for aerial spraying. It's much longer. It's over, a half a mile. It's 2,900 feet. It goes into the next quarter section. And this thing, it took me hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of moving dirt to make sure this thing drains properly after a rain. After this 2 3/4 rain we had, I could have been going off that strip within 24 hours. I have it drained that well. And that's a very complex thing. I spent over $100,000 on equipment to build this thing. And again, that's, this isn't what you're here to argue, but I think it goes to the problem we're having, in negotiations. And I think that it's very important that nobody is appraising this like it's a commercial ag aviation strip. And I think that's where we're really struggling.
Commissioner Steen, continue.
This might be for the land agent. Have the land agents considered the data Mr. Gus has provided or suggest that they have available? And that best for ag, and we're not going to go further than that.
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Commissioner Steen. From my recollection and understanding of that, the appraisers have looked at how is this land being used today, and I think everybody's acknowledging that it is a grass airstrip, but the question comes into whether or not the business operations are actually functioning out of that grass airstrip. As you've heard Mr. Gus say, he's operating out of the West Fargo Airport, and I think there are probably good intentions of moving that operation over to the grass airstrip, but the appraisers have looked at it and said, well, that was an intention. It's not actually there today. There's no hangar. There's no permanent facilities to support an egg spraying operation. And so given all that, they struggled to put a value on the intentions. So,
Commissioner Steen, anything further? Commissioner Sherling and Commissioner Brightling.
Thank you. So, Mr. Gus, you paid ag prices for that land,
No.
correct? You did not.
Came to agreement.
I'm sorry again, sir.
So when I negotiated with the landowner, he offered to sell us the lot that was there, and it was a pretty reasonable price. I think it was 35 grand. And I said, well, would you be willing to sell some land for an airstrip? You needed to acquire a fair amount, and he looked at that and he looked how far it went out there, cutting up the land, and he wanted 120 grand for the rest of it.
And then in addition to what you paid for it, you've done improvements.
Yeah.
I mean,
you got
including a hangar that you, correct?
No, I did not build a hangar there. Because of the diversion, we just said, we're going to invest another quarter of a million.
You were going to, but then stopped short of doing that.
Right.
And, this is such a unique situation. I mean, of all the property that we've, are tasked to acquire for this project, I think it's fair to say this is the only airstrip. So it is unique, and obviously it's just been very, very difficult to come to an agreement.
Right, and it's not that unique. Again, Dean Lesmeister, going to come and testify, over by Saban, sold his runway, GAFX 2020 land.
Unique to this project.
Sure.
And,
but it's still one that should be considered.
The important thing here, and I certainly understand the difficulty that everybody here has had in trying to come up with a fair price. This is just one of those situations that probably is going to have to be sorted out at a much higher level than this group. But to me, what I understand from Mr. Frederickson is we need to just make sure that
I understand
that the process was followed,
but I think there's enough questions here that
there's
a way to vote no on this.
You disagree with the appraisal, and I certainly understand that. I sympathize with that, and I understand that you disagree with the appraisal. But did we follow the process? And that would be the question. It appears to me that we did, unless you're telling me that we didn't.
Well, based on fraudulent information. You know, that's what I'm here to say.
Based
Yeah.
on what fraudulent is.
Well, that in the initial appraisal. I mean, because that's the only appraisal that was sent through all this process, so that's what they're basing this on. I mean, that's just a flat out lie.
But we have followed the process as far as you've been notified and.
Well, right, but when I send a letter to the district about concerns about coming in the middle of a pandemic with a ton, I mean, I've got a ton of evidence I wanted to present, and not even a call from anybody. I called one of the district commissioners, and I said, what's going on here? What? And he said, just be sure you're a good negotiator. I think he was telling me not to be such a prick, but I can't. I'm so frustrated with this. That's who I am today, and I think it's because of how I've been treated. And I hear people say I'm throwing allegations around. A guy named Ron, I can't remember Ron's last name. He was the one who told me that the district felt that I had no intentions of ever putting an aerial spraying strip there, and that I was only doing this to try to gouge more money out of the diversion authority. He's the one who said that. I didn't come up with that out of thin air. That was told to me by somebody representing the district.
Well, I certainly appreciate your frustration. I don't think that we're going to solve your problem the way it needs to be solved.
What I'm asking you to do, what I'm really asking you to do is hold the district accountable for their behavior. I mean, I think there's some real problems with the way my wife and I were treated in all this. I mean, we're 60 years old. We're looking for a route to retire. And right now, we're losing where our business is now. We can't move it to where we want to have it. We got nowhere to turn. And without this grass strip, I see that we're going to have to try to work till we're 70 to make a go at retirement. And we just get nowhere with the district. We just got nowhere. And so, but I'm trying to give you a route to say, yeah, you know what? Things weren't followed properly here. Let's hold them accountable for that. Let's say, you know what? Some of this behavior isn't acceptable. And vote no on this one. I think, I think this is one you can rationalize. But that's what I'm here asking you to do.
Mr. Chairman, can I offer just a brief comment?
Hold on 1 second, Commissioner Breitling, and then
Sure.
Mr. Fredericks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Really, you're arguing value, right?
Yeah.
Value.
You jump up and get, sorry.
Well, no, here I'm arguing the process. But in negotiations, I am arguing
Value is what
right.
your
Well, sure.
problem is.
Sure.
So that's got nothing to do with the process.
Well, but the process they came to their conclusion is what I have a problem. Is that's the argument I'm having.
That isn't the process. You're saying they made some wrong decisions, but that's not the process.
But isn't it?
No.
Isn't it the process to offer fair and just compensation and
offer
to make
is to
people
have-
whole? I mean, isn't that
What
the
they're required
process?
by law to do is achieve an appraisal, the second one, present it to you, and then try to negotiate.
Right. If
And that's
they're
the
required to do it, there's been no negotiation. Again, I sent a letter to try to further that, and I got nothing in reply.
Who did you address the letter to?
The Water Resource District. Did they receive it? Is there anybody who's got that on file? I sent it both on email. I can find the email.
Yeah, it's, Chairman, if I may, I believe if I recall right, the letter was expressing hesitation in attending a meeting and expressing hesitation regarding the virtual nature of the way business has been forced to be done with the pandemic. I'm not sure whether a response was made. I guess I'll take your word that it wasn't, but I know we did receive that letter, and the joint board felt like we were having multiple people attend meetings virtually and felt like that was constructive in getting our business done from the joint
My
board.
wife had asthma, high blood pressure, and in March, things were different back then. So please, hope you can understand.
No, that's not an issue. Understood. My perspective, I'm just one person talking. I get you.
But I thought it deserved a reply of some kind.
Mr. Fredericks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I essentially was going to indicate that Mr. Gus is basically raising a value argument. I think Commissioner Breitling covered that. I guess in response to the meeting request, as you'll note in your packets, the joint board did invite Mr. Gus to the meeting. I understand his frustration in terms of the appraisal, but I don't think there's any question that we followed the process. Now, in terms of his request to meet, I think the Cass County Joint Board stands ready to meet at any of our meetings, and Mr. Gus can certainly attend. I understand his frustration that we're meeting virtually. We're living in a pandemic. It's not a perfect scenario. We understand that, but I don't think the Joint Board has indicated that they're unwilling to meet with him, and they meet twice a month. So I do think this is a value question, and I think it's most likely, as Commissioner Sherling noted, I think it's most likely an issue that's going to have to be resolved in litigation. Hopefully, we can still resolve something, but otherwise, it'll be for a court to decide, I believe.
Mr. Gus, when did you send the letter? Your last correspondence?
Right after I believe I got that letter.
So I'm going to guess it's the invite letter sent, which is 3/31.
Yep.
So right after that.
Yep.
So April sometime.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, I even called one of the, city, what do they call? They call commissioners too?
Directors.
Directors.
Oh, yeah.
Directors.
Resource, yep.
Called him personally, and, I'm not gonna throw him under the bus.
No.
Express my concerns, and I mean, I think a guy should get an answer to a letter like that. I don't know.
Mr. Dodds, further thoughts?
I think Mr. Frederickson summed it up from our standpoint, I guess.
Okay, commissioners' thoughts? Further discussion? I guess maybe I can start. So I'm struggling with this one myself. I'm going to take you at your word. You can show me emails, and I don't have them. I believe that you do. Well, but I do believe you have them, because it's a pretty hefty thing to say that I've got correspondence, and all of a sudden someone calls your bluff, and next thing you know. So I believe you. I understand Mr. Dodds, and I'm going to touch on this again. Pardon my terminology, undercutting of his appraiser. I understand the logic of why you would have gone and hired him, and I understand why let me back up. I understand why you touched base with the gentleman by, he said Spearfish or Rapid City or something, right? That makes sense to me. It also makes sense, Mr. Dodds, that you would then contact that person too, saying, I understand there's an appraiser that's got some expertise in this, be it pilot or be just a guy that's done this a lot.
He didn't know he was a pilot. All I told
Okay.
Nicole, I told her I was
Gotcha.
hiring an appraiser to dispute what you give it, not even to give me.
And if I understand the logic there, it would follow that we always pay for that appraiser for you, not you. So that makes sense to me, that the diversion authority would go and hire them, not to undercut you, but to have that person come in. And again, you're going to rely on whether it's hired by you or hired by us or hired by someone else, the diversion authority, whoever.
Has there been a discussion about that?
They have
Is
to
it
be.
okay if we operate it?
Yeah, but they have to be operating ethically. I mean, that could be anybody lying to us. So I don't know that I don't trust this appraiser just because the diversion authority came in. But overall,
No, that's not the point. What I'm saying is that the people who wanted to hire him, wouldn't they have talked to me about it? Is it okay if we contact him? Is it okay if we hire him to do an appraiser for you?
That's a fair question.
Right. That was, it wasn't done. There was no discussion about that. All of a sudden I get a letter from him, John Littis, telling me that he's now working for Ken Helge's company. And I'm just, well, when did this happen?
I guess for me, what it comes down to is, I don't deny that you bought this land before the diversion, right? You owned it in 2007, you said, correct? Prior to 2009 anyway.
Yeah, 2007.
So the diversion wasn't even in the scope of things. I would be curious to find out, and again, this is really off scope here, but I have to share my thoughts because I feel compelled to do so, Eric. So I'd be curious to find out what it costs to reconstruct this runway for you. I don't know. I don't know if it's even feasible, if it's possible. I would be curious to find out what you invested in it.
There's an article in Flying Magazine, it takes $500,000
Yeah, but whatever you put into it, I'd be curious to find out what, the land value purchase plus what you've invested to make it usable. Again, off topic, but pistons are firing, right? So, yeah, I'd be curious to find out what that really is for a number. I get the logic that you didn't build a hangar out here because of the diversion, and frankly, I appreciate that. Had you built it, we'd be compensating you for that too. I would think anyway, right? If this goes to fruition where this runway is unusable, we then have to compensate you for that too, because clearly you have a hangar that doesn't serve any purpose anymore. So rather than a landowner going out, buying land, building a bunch of stuff, and then asking for compensation after the fact, I think in the end, it's better for us that you waited. Troublesome for you, given the predicament you're probably in if West Fargo somehow closes this airport, but I'm appreciative of the fact you didn't do that. So long story short, I'm struggling with this one. So shut up for a minute. Commissioner Sherling.
Well, I appreciate that, Commissioner Peterson. I've met with this individual a couple of times now, and it is, as I said before, not a simple one. And I think if we had been able to come up with some sort of solution for now, that would have happened. And unfortunately, I think that's why it's landed here. I don't see anywhere where we haven't followed all the steps, or they haven't followed all the steps. That's where I think we're at. And there's going to be a number that is going to be hopefully acceptable at some point, but it's a long, long way right now to that point.
Mr. Riley.
One thing I would like everyone to understand and think about is that, in my experience, about 80% of these that are authorized to pursue eminent domain settle before trial. And that process is still available and takes place regularly. And there's every reason to believe that that will occur here as well.
Commissioners, further thoughts or discussion? Questions? Motion?
I move to authorize the Cass County Joint Water Resource District to utilize quick take eminent domain under section 61-16-1.09 parens 2 close parens of the North Dakota Century Code to take an easement where right of way and temporary easement, if any, regarding the OIN described above in A4.
Is there a second, please? Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Steen.
Comment. I don't disagree that the process has been followed, but I don't know if the other 7 of these are or 6 of these are going to present to us tonight. But based upon the last round, I'm starting to wonder how the negotiation process is really working, and so I'm patiently waiting to find out, what the rest of the discussion is about. But the process has been followed. If we want to get technical, I'm just curious as to how the negotiation process is going. That's all.
Please come. Actually, Commissioner Sherling, and then Mr. Dodds, or should Mr. Dodds go first, Commissioner?
Well, I guess I defer to Mr. Dodds, but I believe we have to look at what the intent of the legislature was for this body in inserting us into this process.
Mr. Dodds.
It wasn't to renegotiate.
Well, I'm not suggesting we renegotiate, but part of the process is negotiation. And what I'm hearing, it seems, of course, the people coming to us are the ones who have the biggest issues, but what I'm hearing is the negotiation process wasn't fair. That's what I'm hearing. And that's not for me to decide, but when I keep hearing that, then I got to wonder, is the process really working the way it should be? That's all I'm asking. I'm not suggesting it's going to change how I look at this, but I'm getting a little bit tired of hearing that, if it's true.
Commissioner Sherling, and then Mr. Dodds. Mr. Dodds.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. To that point, I think Mr. Steen hit the nail on the head that we'd way rather not be here today. I think Sean and Dan and others would attest to that as well. Unfortunately, these are the most difficult negotiations that we've been doing. And I would say that, for the project in general, we have acquired over 380 parcels following the same process. And we had 5 property owners last meeting. We have 7 today. And so I guess I'd like to believe that there's still a lot of good in the process we are following, and we have had overwhelming success. Unfortunately, we're here. I don't think any of the property owners want to be here, probably way less than I want to be here. But, I guess we feel sort of between a rock, a bit in a hard place. I understand last meeting you heard some property owners who were advocating that they wanted more money, and I get it's not just a value thing. But those are situations where we're using taxpayer dollars and we have a real hard time. And I think Dan and the joint board can attest to that. They have a real hard time, paying what the property owners want when we have appraisals that are done, and perhaps the appraisal needs to be reviewed and updated again. Again, I think our position is we want to pay property owners what their land is worth. And in our experience, we've generally been paying a bit more than appraised value. And so the proof is in the pudding and some of that.
Commissioner Brightling?
I don't have anything.
Commissioner Pollock?
I have a question for Commissioner Brightling. I believe that you sit in on all of the joint board meetings.
Yes, I do.
And do you ever see any evidence of misstatements or are there things that cause you concern as you are closely involved in the process?
No, they're not. I believe that they lean over backwards to try to find a way to resolve differences of what values should be utilized. And I have not seen any personal bias as to a particular landowner. No, the answer is no.
Any further discussion, commissioners? I'll finish this then. Maybe finish it. So I'm struggling along with Commissioner Steen. I think the struggle is that we don't want to be here doing this either. And I realize we're not the ones that are going to be the eminent domain actors, but struggling with the value. It seems as though I'm going to go back and dredge up some ugly, dirty water. We didn't blink an eye when we paid one landowner $2 million in Oxbow and then watched him move to West Fargo. The intent of that reimbursement was housing of last resort. We bought out a huge chunk of land in Oxbow with the intent of that person staying there. I have it in writing that I objected to it because that's not what the purpose of that law is for. The purpose of the law is to make sure they had a spot as they had prior in Oxbow. We got $2.7 million. They bought a house for $750,000 in West Fargo and nobody blinked an eye. And I'm not saying everything we did in Oxbow was wrong because there was undervalued. The state goofed us up too, so it wasn't just the diversion authority overpaying. That's a straight lie because I know that's not true. There were circumstances that surrounded a number of those homes that the one I'm bringing up right now where we didn't blink an eye paying this guy way too much. And again, watched him move to West Fargo. And his wife goes on the radio and defends it because they start getting blowback from all their friends because, yeah, this wasn't what was supposed to happen. This is a unique circumstance. I'm going to support it because, frankly, I think the process was followed. I'm not comfortable with it at all. I'm not comfortable with why you're here. I'm not comfortable with how you got here. Whether or not you're going to have a commercial runway there and Delta's landing next week, I don't know. That's not my place. But I would ask the Water Resource District to maybe stop and think about what we did for some of the people in those unique circumstances in the past to maybe prevent them having to come here. Your peers, theoretically, right, as this plays itself out. And it's tough to be critical because I haven't been in the room for every minute either, right? So it sounds like I'm being critical of all our members that have participated before me until I'm showing up here at the last minute. So I'm not, but in the same breath, I kind of am. Because again, I've watched people get overpaid, right and wrong. I was one of the people that asked for additional appraisers to be done down in Oxbow because I thought they were getting too much money. It was myself and I think Commissioner Mike Williams sitting on land development started that check again because we just shook our heads saying, and this wouldn't be to your favor, we thought we're overpaying. So let's come back and justify where those dollars are coming from and make sure that the owners are fairly compensated and taxpayers aren't being taken advantage of. two things that aren't mutually exclusive. So again, I'm going to support it, much to your chagrin, but I think the process has been followed. But in the same breath, again, I'm going to say you shouldn't be here.
It sounds like you've been listening to me, Commissioner Peterson. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm not going to vote in your favor though, but I think legally we've done what we're supposed to, but I'm struggling with that's all that we've done. So I'm going to shut my mouth. Commissioners, any further thoughts?
Question.
Commissioner Breitling.
Question. I'll call the question.
We don't need to, I don't think. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Pollock?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Brightling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you both for attending. 4B.
Chair? I believe that there's somebody here for item 4H, the Tintus property. Am I correct on that?
Yes. Okay.
I don't know if you want to address that before you.
I would.
I
Are there
don't
any-
know. It's just it's totally up to you, but I
Ms.
just wanted
Warden,
to let
thank
you know that.
Is there other owners?
Yeah.
Okay, and your?
B.
Okay, so we'll go 4B, and then we'll go to H. That should be only two owners in the room. And then we'll go virtually if there's anyone online. Okay, Mr.
So,
Jones, thank you.
4B on your agenda is OIN 220. This is owned by Vernon Anderson. Vern is in the room here. I'll give a brief introduction of this acquisition and ask Vern if he'd like to say a few words as well. The map of this parcel is on page 6 within the packet of OIN 220. We've been working with Mr. Anderson for quite some time. He owns two businesses that operate out of this property. One of them is the Prairie Scale business, which Vern can probably give a much better description than I can, but basically it involves commercial scales, and he operates out of that. The larger building there on the parcel, and then there's also a storage business where he has tenants that store personal property within the storage unit. This property is located within the channel. It's south and west of Horace, and so it's towards the southern end of the channel. As you see in the correspondence and the communications log is attached, that's on page 30. You can see that there's been quite a bit of conversation and communication with Mr. Anderson, along with his business partner, his son Cooper. They started the process back in 16 and 17. We recognized that the business was going to be impacted and need to be acquired by the project. And so there was some attempts to try to find a replacement property. It appears there's not suitable buildings existing that he could move into, at least there wasn't some time ago. And so through that process, Vern and his son did buy a lot in the industrial park in Horace, and they had thoughts of moving their operations into Horace city limits to relocate their business. Horace in that industrial park has some requirements for architectural treatments on the buildings, some gabled roofs and brick facades and other things that certainly would make the building architecturally pleasing. But some of those things are not necessarily what is, Mr. Anderson owns today. I think is maybe fair. A very functional building, nice high quality steel building's been added on to a couple times. But my point in bringing that up is some of those architectural requirements make the cost of the building a bit more. And so as he's looked at the value of replacing what he has, that ends up at a fairly high dollar amount compared to what the appraised value was. And so again, we have this appraisal difference between what it costs to rebuild and the cost of the appraisal, or the value established in the appraisal. More recently, we've met with both Ken Helvey and I met with Vern and his son Cooper. We did talk about some different options. We are currently, I guess as of last Thursday, the joint board did authorize reimbursing them for temporary space. So they are going to move temporarily this fall. The joint board has agreed to pay for that temporary space for a year, and that our hope is that provides enough time for a new facility to be constructed. And we've started to look at some of the remnant parcels that the project has acquired, and perhaps we could use one of those remnant parcels as a site for relocating this displaced business. At this point, I think we're still working on the reviews of their cost estimate compared to our cost estimate information, and so we do have this value discrepancy. I'm moderately optimistic that we're going to be able to reach an agreement with Mr. Anderson for his impacts here, although we don't have that agreement in place today, and so that's why we felt like we needed to still bring this forward. Again, the clock is ticking on construction, and so we wanted to bring this forward since it was on your agenda and we don't have an agreement. So that's maybe a snapshot. I know Ken is the land agent. He's had many of these conversations. And Vern, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say. I can get out of the way.
No, thank you. Voice my opinion, but yeah, that's a work in progress. We've been working on it for the last 5 years with them.
And you're Mr. Anderson, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm the owner of the property and the two businesses. One of the businesses now is going to be too late to construct anything because that is a storage business for people in the area. We're going to basically have to close that down. Our scale business, which is by far the most important, we service and calibrate and install scales in the 3-state area. We supply equipment all over the United States for special systems. We've operated out of Horace there since 1994, I believe, when we moved out there. We have about 20 employees, so we want to keep things going there. So we were able to find a place that we can go lease for a year, and that will work. But the time frame here is what's critical because Eric and Ken have talked about supplying us pieces of property, slivers of property along the diversion. Well, by the time they get zoned for industrial or commercial, that takes time. All of this takes time, and we don't have time anymore. I'm trying to retire. It's kind of been hanging over my head. So as far as following the procedures, I believe they have. We're still in negotiations.
Anything further, sir? Commissioner Steen.
Mr. Anderson, you answered the question before I was able to ask it. Was reading through all the information and the discussion, it sounds like the negotiations are continuing.
Yes,
there's no, I mean, there's no loss of communication with regard to that, and so
we're making headway.
Hearing that, and so now we're really at a value issue and a timing issue.
Right.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that.
Anything further, sir?
Nope, that'll do it.
Commissioners, any questions for our owner? Commissioner Pollack.
I move to authorize Cass County Joint Water District to utilize quick take eminent domain under section 6116 1.092-2 of the North Dakota Century Code to take easement for a right-of-way and the temporary easement, if any, needed regarding the OIN described above in A4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anything further, Mr. Dodds?
No, excuse me. Yep. Nothing else specific, but I would just like to commend Vern. I don't always meet directly with property owners myself, but I did have the opportunity to meet with Vern and Cooper a few weeks ago. And frankly, if I would have put myself in those shoes where somebody was coming to take property or whatever, I would not have been as constructive, and appreciate the good conversation we had.
Wonderful. Any further discussion, commissioners? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Sherling? Yes. Breitling?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you both. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
We're going to jump to item H.
Sure.
Mr. Dodds, our owners in
9750 and 9751.
the very
Last one in your packet.
Very last one, Commissioner.
So this is property owner Mary Ann Tintas, and I know there was some recent communications about this property. I think some email correspondence earlier today as well. So this property is directly west of the Willow Creek development just south of 94, kind of by the fireworks store. If you know where the Blackwater fireworks store is, just south of that. And so you can see the map on page 5 of the packet for OINs 9750, 9751. You can see on the map there that we are proposing to acquire the entirety of 9750. I believe that's about 58 acres, and then another 30 plus acres of 9751. We have had an appraisal conducted. The appraisal was valued at 480,000 or so. And the counteroffer that we've seen on, as you see on page 4, the counteroffer is 788,000. The joint board did, if I recall right, the joint board did review this counteroffer and ended up turning it down. And so I guess through those negotiations, that's why we're here today. And I guess that's a quick summary and turn the property owner.
Joe Kempis, Mary Ann's son. Thank you, Commissioner, for talking with me today. Dewey already answered my question about if you're going to still negotiate. I'd have to agree with you, Rick, about negotiation was not the best. There was never any counter offers or anything like that. Some of our neighbors, right adjoining acreage, are getting $2,500 an acre more. That's a big difference. As long as they're willing to negotiate still, that's great. And that's concerned today. We were worried about here's the check, and we're not going to negotiate anymore. So that's the problem that we were worried about. I understand your point. You got to pass this today, and that's understandable. But as long as they're willing to negotiate still, that'll be great. But there was such a difference between the neighbor's property feet away than ours. That was the problem. So hopefully we can come to a conclusion with that. So
I agree.
So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, your thoughts? Mr. Dodds, anything to add?
I think if it was Joe, I think we'd certainly like to continue to negotiate and get these done. I hope that Dewey's experience holds true and that the vast majority of these are hopefully going to be settled before before the trial process. I would just say procedurally, and Sean, if I misstep here, please correct me, but procedurally, if the county is going to grant the joint board authorization to proceed, there's a couple procedural things with the court to get a case number, and then the joint board basically deposits the amount of the appraisal with the court. But again, that doesn't preclude us from continuing to negotiate. And so just because the money is sitting in a court holding account, I think the property owner might be able to access that, but it doesn't preclude us from continuing to negotiate. And so that would certainly be our hope, that we'd rather pay the property owner rather than pay the attorneys.
Commissioner Steen.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for a motion, so I move to authorize the Cass County Joint Water Resource District to utilize quick take eminent domain under section 61-16-1.19 sub 2 of the North Dakota Century Code to take a easement for a right-of-way and temporary easement, if any, regarding OIN 9750 and 9751 described above.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moving second. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Breitling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Motion passes. Mr. Dodds, are you aware of anyone online that may be speaking regarding their property?
There's a chance that Lynn Musteth is on for 4E, the Bracken property.
I received an email that they were not attending. Yep.
Okay, so that's all of our owners, both physically and virtually. I'm not seeing anybody jump up online either, so let's just go CDE. Go down the list.
Okay.
Dodds, please.
So
4C.
Item 4C is OIN 722 and 723. This is in your packet. There's a map on page 5 showing the location of these parcels. This land is directly west of the Eagle Run development. In fact, it's directly west of the, I'm drawing a blank. It's west of the Cheyenne diversion, but there's also that
subdivision there that's just west of the Cheyenne diversion. This is west of that.
Hayden Heights.
Hayden Heights, thank you. This land is bisected by the channel. You can see that there is a 5 or 10 acre parcel in the middle of that. That 5 acre parcel in the middle of that was originally going to be on the agenda for tonight, but we did reach an agreement with that property owner. And so thankfully that we don't have to discuss that one. The farmland in question is parcel OAN 722 and 723. Usual process, we've had this appraised. You can see that our appraiser valued it at $9,000 an acre, which in our experience, raw farmland in the valley here is going somewhere around the $5,000 range, depending on the quality. It could be plus or minus $500, generally speaking. This property owner has consistently requested $25,000 an acre for their farmland. Lisa Kildee with SRF is here, and she's been having some correspondence with him, with the property owner. Although as you look back on page 37 in the packet, you'll notice that there was quite a few voice messages left, and we were not able to get a whole lot of correspondence with the property owner. They are represented by Rinke Noonan, and they've indicated that they're working on their own appraisal. I don't believe we've seen that yet. And so that's a general summary of where things have been.
Mr. Pollak. Has the process been followed as mandated by the statutes?
Yes.
I move approval of this section.
Is there a second, please? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I just have a comment.
Commissioner Sherling.
And, here, maybe, I hope we don't see a lot more of these, but would you mind terribly putting a map of the project?
Sure.
You just need one page.
Yep.
With each property identified on it. It's just, I don't know, it's just in my brain where it's just easier for me to see this down by Forest rather than
Yep.
down by Garland.
Like a master plan almost?
Yeah, just, I mean, it's neither here nor there, but it's.
I would, and I know this is small, but in the bottom here, there is a overview map, and you see the red dot.
Oh,
It gives you
okay.
some flavor, but I can understand that
This project's about the size of West Fargo.
we can do better, so.
I appreciate that, thank you. That's all.
Further discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sherling? Brightling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 4D, please.
Item 4D is OAN 1199. This is the John and Julie Larson parcel. Just get me organized here. This is just south and west of Horace. In fact, it's close to Vern Anderson's property that we were just talking about earlier. There's a map on page 5. And if you use an eye test, you can see the little red dot on the inset down below to show you that it's basically south and west of Horace. This parcel is bordered by the Cheyenne River on the east side of the parcel, and the channel cuts off a portion of the parcel as well. We've had this parcel appraised. Again, our appraisal was taking about 20.5 acres. Appraisal valued it at $9,500 per acre, coming up with a total appraised value of $232,000. The counter offer that we've received is $475,000. The property owner has also asked for a right of first refusal, which is something that we're standardly practicing. That was a legislative item they've asked us to do. And the property owner did like to retain some hunting rights. Sure, the details, I guess, on that. This parcel is represented by Steve Quam, and we've had quite a few conversations with the representative for this parcel. The communications log, if you're interested, is on page 35 of the packet for this property.
Have we seen the hunting rights before? I don't recall that we have.
There was one parcel in Minnesota that the MIC board, Moorhead folks, acquired. It was in the upstream mitigation area, where all we technically need for the project is an easement. The property owner asked us to buy the property in fee title, but he wanted to retain hunting rights for a certain period of time. And this parcel is impacted by the footprint, and so I'm not exactly sure how the hunting rights, I don't think we're going to be allowing hunting on the channel limit.
It says until it becomes not usable, I think, or at
Sure.
least, so I'm sure it's just gonna wait till the
Yeah.
channel goes in.
Sure.
Commissioner Steen.
One question, notice on both the documentation of the communication, this one ends on June 10th. So there's nothing with the seller since June 10th.
Lisa,
I thought that just caught my eye. It's like, well, that seems like a long time.
sure. Lisa Killian with us.
Hi. Yes, so communication with John has been inconsistent and just not getting a counteroffer. He was telling me that he was getting an attorney. So I was just waiting for him to let me know who his attorney was that he was going to be working with. And then ever since when we prepared this, I've been in touch with Steve Quam, working with his attorney. So that's kind of where you see that. So, yep.
Questions, discussion of motions?
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the, well, first, before I ask that, have all the statutory steps been followed properly?
Yes, they have.
I move approval of the OIN 1199.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Steen,
Yes.
Sherling,
Yes.
Riley,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Pollock,
Yes.
Motion passes. 4E, Mr. Dodds.
In front of you, item 4E is OIN 9174. This is the David Bracken property. There is a map in your packet on page 6. This is a rural residential property that is located directly west of Horace and West Fargo. I believe County Road 6 is at 52nd Avenue. And so this property is roughly 10 acres. It includes a rural residential structure as well as a few older outbuildings. We did have this property appraised back in 2019. The appraised value was $379,000. There have been offers and counter offers going back and forth. Pat Roberts with ProSource Technologies is the land agent. He's with us virtually today. And there has been quite a bit of recent communication on this parcel. One of the unique items that I'd like to share with you is that the 2019 tax assessed value for this parcel was somewhere in the $270,000 range. The 2020 tax assessed value for this parcel is in the $420,000 range. And so there was a 74% increase in taxable value. I did speak with Paul Fracassi, the county's tax assessor, and he indicated that the change was primarily due to an actual reappraisal process that the county instituted in last year. And so we have seen a pretty big jump in in the tax assessed value. And so we've discovered that the property owner is represented by Lynn Mesteth from Dwyer Law Office, and Pat Roberts has had quite a bit of communications with Lynn on this matter. Given that new information, we do have intentions of putting together, basically using that new information, putting together a potential counteroffer back to the property owner. And this is one of those situations where, again, I'm sort of moderately confident that we'll have a counteroffer that hopefully is agreeable to both parties. I don't have that here today. This is one of those things where timing, we continue to negotiate and we don't have a deal. And so I felt like we needed to bring this forward. That being said, the joint board will meet again next week and hopefully we'll be able to reach terms on things. It is interesting to note, however, that if you look back on page 4, the negotiating summary, the initial counteroffer from the property owner was $600,000. Their second counteroffer was $691,000, and their most recent counteroffer was $780,000. And so we were going the wrong way instead of the right way, and sort of
like you should have taken the check.
Yeah,
good job.
And so anyway, we have not reached agreement on that, but with this new information, I think there are some new facts out there that we would like to bring forward, and we will be diligent in doing so. That's all I have. And Lynn was planning to attend today. I think she chose not to. I don't know this, but I think she maybe chose not to because of this, tax discussion that we had yesterday and, well, over the weekend and earlier this morning. So.
Commissioner Steen, then Commissioner Paul.
This will change my vote on this at all, but I'm curious, what part of your description here was there's a development plan to take the 10 acres into 5 lots. Is that development plan in existence prior to negotiations or afterwards?
It's my understanding that development plan is very high level and was developed more recently. I don't know the exact genesis of it, but they did share that with the joint board. It was kind of parceling up that lot into a few different parcels. This property, there's a little bit of debate exactly on who has zoning authority. I believe it's actually within Horace's ET, perhaps even Horace's city limits. And so the question about whether they can or can't develop it is probably one of those questions that would go to the city of Horace. All that being said, there's not much development west of the Cheyenne Diversion Channel, and so that's a bit of the dilemma that we're curious. Yep.
Commissioner Pollack.
Have all the steps been followed properly, the statutorily required steps?
Yes, Commissioner, they have.
I move to authorize the Cass County Joint Water District to utilize quick take eminent domain under section 6116-1.09, paragraph 2 of the North Dakota Century Code to take an easement for a right-of-way, a temporary easement, if any, regarding OIN 9174.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Pollack?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Sherling? Yes. Brightling?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 4F, Mr. Dodds.
Item 4F is one that we can remove from the agenda. We do have a purchase agreement signed with the owners of 9263.
4F has been removed.
Easiest one we do today.
Item 4G, please, Mr. Dodds.
Item 4G is OIN 9286 and 9743. This is the Daniel Flatten properties. These properties, there's a map on page 5. These properties are located along the western boundary of the channel, just south of I-94. So these are just south and west of the Willow Creek development that we spoke about a little bit earlier. The property owner here is, as you can see on the map, there's 2 parcels. Parcel 9743 has roughly 10 acres or so of land that is impacted by the project. In fact, I apologize, I believe it's cumulatively about 10 acres of land impacted by the project. That was appraised at about $7,600 an acre, making our offer of $72,000. The property owner has counteroffered. They've asked for $16,750 per acre and for a counteroffer of just shy of $350,000. We have had some conversations with this property owner. As you can see, this counteroffer was from late July. More recently, the property owner has indicated that they're planning to retain counsel. I don't believe that they had suggested meeting with the Rinke Noonan firm. The Rinke Noonan firm has not confirmed that they're under contract, at least to our knowledge. And so that's a summary of where we are with these negotiations. But I would just want to add to you the parcel directly to the east of this is owned by Daniel's son, Derek Flatten. And Derek Flatten has constructed a home in the channel that we are continuing to negotiate on. I only bring that up just so you're aware that there's a family member involved on a separate negotiation that we're also struggling with. The home that was constructed is in the footprint of the channel directly east of these parcels that we're talking about here today.
Commissioners, discussion?
Are you comfortable that all the steps have been properly followed as the legislature has mandated?
Yes, I am.
Move to authorize the Cass County Joint Water District to utilize quick take eminent domain under section 6116-1.09/2 of the North Dakota Century Code. Take an easement or a right-of-way and a temporary easement,
if any, regarding OIN 9286-9743. there a second, please? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Sherling? Breitling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Keen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Motion passes. Mr. Dodds, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to your team. I know it's the last time. Guessing the next won't be easy either, but appreciate it. Commissioner Pollock.
If you don't mind, I didn't realize that you were the Lisa that was being referred to until we just introduced you. And I wonder if you wouldn't, I thought Mr. Gus kind of disparaged your reputation, and I just wanted to ask you on the record about that.
Well,
that was you too.
It was Nicole Wood. She was an agent that was working with Ken before I was involved.
Oh, okay.
Ken maybe, I don't know.
Well, I'll offer you that same opportunity, and if you want to step forward. I don't know. If there's anything, if you think anything was unfactual or.
Let me just, if I may, Chairman, I've been working on this role for a number of years, and I sometimes get the opportunity to meet directly with property owners, which I generally enjoy, but it is stressful. And I guess I'd just like to, maybe pat these guys on the back. They have a heck of a job, and they're not looking for any, rewards or pats on the back or anything, but they're hired, they're professionals to do this. If they have to go out to people's kitchen tables and sit there and tell them, we need to take your land. And it might be a 4-generation farm, it might be a unique airstrip, it might be, a variety of different things. And they get beat over the head, they get, the phone book thrown at them, all sorts of things. And sometimes they come back with a counter offer that they think, yeah, this seems to make sense, but it's presented, to the acquiring agency, and they say, man, we can't stomach paying that much over, whether it's a percentage or whatever it might be. And so then they feel like, I thought I was going to have a deal, and for whatever reason, the deal doesn't get approved. And so then they kind of get it from both sides. And so that's the life that these guys are living. And, my role is to help manage all that process with a really good team of people. And so just to give you a little flavor of what they might go through, and again, not looking for any empathy or anything, but I just wanted to share those observations from my perspective working on this for a number of years.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm not going to say too much. This is an emotional, issue for the landowners. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've been called lots of names. I've had guns pulled on me. I've had baseball bats thrown at me. So, there's Mr. Gus and I have a difference of opinions. I mean, I do want to speak specifically to the whole notion of this other appraiser that was from South Dakota. That was built, I believe Commissioner Sherling was actually part of that discussion, where we were trying to work collaboratively as a team with the Gus and us to identify an appraiser that everyone could live with, that Mr. Gus thought was an acceptable appraiser in his mind, and that we were comfortable with too. This person was identified, so it was 2017, I better be honest with you, I don't remember if we had a specific conversation like looking for his blessing to reach out to that appraiser, but he certainly knew that was happening because that was what the conversations were when we were doing that. But as far as the other parts, it just is what it is. That's just part of my business. So, thank you.
Right, thank you. Might I continue?
Yep.
So I sat on both the Southeast Caps board and the joint board, and and Dewey was at every meeting. And these meetings are long and very laborious. I mean, you think this meeting is long? They start at 8 and they work till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, they work through lunch because there's so much detail and so much information. And on many cases, when I was sitting on the board that had to make the decision, I would think they were paying too much, or I would question. And I tell you what, the people that are employed in doing this are professionals, and I don't second guess the information that they give us at all. There's always a difference between parcels, and if we want to be the negotiators and the final arbitrators, then it's best that we be involved in the process at the joint board and realize the impact of all of their discussions. So we're sitting here and we think, well, this guy should get another $5,000 an acre. What does that do to all of the other people that sold their property at less than $5,000 an acre? If you have a formula, you have to stick to it, and you have to stick to it through the whole process. And it makes me uncomfortable, as I know that it makes you uncomfortable when we hear these stories. But we're only hearing part of it. And the attention to detail and the thoroughness of the appraisers, and then the final appraiser, which is John Albrecht, the man's a genius. I mean, and he understands it so well. So I have a lot of confidence in the facts that the Water Resource District brings us, because I've observed it.
Commissioner Steen.
Commissioner Polk, I appreciate everything you said, and I don't think I've heard one commissioner up here who says they want to be part of the negotiation process. I think what we're sitting here doing is we hear about the negotiation process. We have to ask the questions. We've got citizens coming to us with questions, with concerns. If we don't listen to them, we're not doing our job either. But I don't think one commissioner up here wants to be part of the negotiation. Nobody wants to talk about $5,000 or $500,000. We want us to understand how the process is working. That's my perspective, at least on the discussion that's taking place here.
Go to the meeting. This isn't the place to learn about how the process goes.
I just respectfully disagree. That is our job. We are supposed to be evaluating the process. That's what we're supposed to be doing here, period.
Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in as Chair of Land Management and Diversion Board. You know, we've had these conversations for years as to what everybody's role is in these negotiations, and it's really easy to want to jump in and have an opinion. So it just is, especially as a real estate broker for many, many years. You know, I do market analysis all the time, and I mean, it's an opinion of value. And at any rate, you know, we have made it clear for a long time now that the role of land management is to set policy, not to look at valuation individually on particular parcels. And that being said, I want to make sure that the public understands that if they have a concern or an issue with the policy or the procedure or the process, I want to know about it. And, you know, I should know about it long before it comes here. And I hope that you know, that would happen. I think, you know, we've had a lot of public input on our policy, and we're, you know, going through, you know, a lot of the flow achievement evaluations now and how that process is going to work. But once we figure out the policy, then it's up to Ken and everyone else out there to sit down at that kitchen table, and that's when we have a hands-off. If they haven't followed the process, then that's where we will step in at this point. But I think it's just really way too easy to hear these stories and feel like something got missed, and we can't possibly discern that in a 10 or 15 minute time frame of looking at these. So, I mean, at some point I have to trust that you guys have followed every single thing on that item on that checklist. There may be a time when somebody comes before this group and hasn't followed those checklists. It might not, I doubt that it would happen, honestly, with this group, because they absolutely know what they need to do. But there are other instances where that may need to be utilized for the public good, and that could happen. So it's not just this project that we will be seeing this on. So, you know, to Commissioner Steen's point, we do need to make sure that the process is being followed. But I just want to make sure that we don't get down into the weeds of what a particular parcel is worth.
Further discussion? If not, Mr. Dodds, again, thanks to you and your team. Appreciate it. Pass it on to those folks that aren't here. Item 5A, Heritage Fund grant application. Mr. Paulson, are you still on?
Yes, Chairman, I'm here.
Thank you for your patience, sir. Those of you that are still on, our agenda item is the one that's amended. You know what, Mr. Paulson, just you start off. Go for it.
Sure. So, Mr. Chair, I do have a PowerPoint presentation. If I could share that, would you be able to see that?
Let's see, try a share screen. I see you on here. I see you on
Okay.
Teams. You should be able to share a screen and then we see it here. Something's happening. Here we go.
Let me make sure this is the right one here. Nope, sorry about that.
It's a home video.
What I did on vacation.
Here, let's try this one. Sorry, Mr. Chair. All right, do you see the presentation now?
Yeah. We can see it, Joel.
Maximize it. You maximize it, Joel?
Yes, I can. Oh, let's see.
That's your amended agenda?
Thank you.
Drain 27 wetland.
Yeah.
You'll explain.
Yeah, I'll explain. Okay. So if this works, Mr. Chairman, I'll just move forward. Okay. So just want to give a little background on the agenda item here. So the Diversion Authority has been working with MetroCog on a recreation study for the diversion channel and the southern embankment. The study has been released by MetroCog. It's called the FM Greenway Study. Many partners have provided input into this study. The FMDA, MetroCog, West Fargo Parks, Fargo Parks, Horace Parks, the Corps of Engineers, and Cass County. The MetroCog public comment period has ended for the Greenway project, and the study has been released. A part of that project included a focus on a wetland area that was identified as a recreational node. And that wetland area is the Drain 27 Wetland Restoration Project, which the Corps of Engineers is currently designing. They're about 65% done with the plans and specifications, and they plan to implement and build that wetland project in 2022. That project's located south of County Road 14, north of County Road 16, and east of Horace on 57th Street. In that box that you can see here on this slide, right adjacent to the southern embankment. This is an aerial view of what the wetland is going to look like after it's been constructed. And you can see it's a total of 320 acres, 150 acres of wetland, 70 acres of wetland buffer, and 100 acres of inaccessible land adjacent to the wetland complex. So the idea here was to create some sort of a trail system that could be incorporated into an ultimate build out of the MetroCog's recreational plan. The Greenway study identified some potential costs with the trail system around the wetland, and as you can see here, approximately $74,000 in costs. They also look at a number of different trail options, natural surface, concrete trail, and ultimately a wetland boardwalk with varying degrees of costs associated with that. So what brings me here today is we've been asked to assist with MetroCog in identifying funding options. So the Diversion Board of Authority has tasked staff to identify other funding options for recreational components. And so we are not proposing or anticipating the use of any flood diversion funds for recreational components. And so we're assisting in partnering and looking for other opportunities to be able to implement these elements. One potential funding opportunity has been identified as the North Dakota Outdoor Heritage Fund that provides grants for projects of political subdivisions that enhance conservation practices in the state. The next grant deadline is September 1st, and the subsequent grant deadline after that would be May of 2021. So funding directives of the Outdoor Heritage Fund align with the Drain 27 wetland project. So there's a number of directives that the Outdoor Heritage Fund has identified. I'll just quickly go through them. Directive A is providing access to private and public lands for sportsmen, including projects that create fish and wildlife habitat and provide access for sportsmen. This project would do that. Directive B is improving, maintaining, and restoring water quality, soil conditions, plant diversity, animal systems, by supporting other practices of stewardship to enhance farming and ranching. This project would do that. Directive C is developing, enhancing, conserving, and restoring wildlife and fish habitat on private and public lands. And Directive D is conserving natural areas and creating other areas for recreation through the establishment and development of parks and other recreation activities. So the Drain 27 project fits all of the criteria for the goals and mission of the Outdoor Heritage Fund and the funds provided for projects to meet those goals. So here's the schedule for the wetland project. So right now we're still in project design. One of the reasons we're before the County Commission today is that this is a great opportunity to be able to incorporate a trail system into the Corps' plans for that project. The Corps has identified that they will incorporate that if we direct them to. And so really they'd be laying the foundation or the framework for that potential trail system. So if we can bring funding to the table to implement that trail system around the wetland project, the Corps would also include that in their design specifications and move towards constructing that in the 2022 season. So I'll open it up for some questions after this, but the request today is to have the County Commission direct staff to work with the FMDA and MetroCog to link the efforts identified by MetroCog with the design and construction work being done by the Corps of Engineers. Identify the funding gap needed and authorize the county to act as the political subdivision for a grant request for the North Dakota Outdoor Heritage Fund. And the reason we're asking the county is that MetroCog does not have that ability. They are not a full subdivision, political subdivision under the state of North Dakota. And so they need to work with the county as a fiscal agent to apply for the grant and manage the grant. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Commissioner Steen.
A couple questions, Joel. I'm assuming this is outside of the city of Fargo, correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
So does this become the county's responsibility going forward to maintain this walkway?
The diversion authority will assume all operation and maintenance of that wetland long-term in perpetuity. So it would be a diversion responsibility.
Funded basically by county taxpayers. I'm just curious. That's where it's going to come from, right?
It will come from the O&M levy, the operation and maintenance levy, and that levy includes benefiting properties within the city of Fargo, as well as county residents as well. Yes.
Right. Thanks.
Further discussion, questions, commissioners? Commissioner Pollack.
I think that's a good idea. And I think this is a good approach in order to get this funded. And the maintenance would come out of the maintenance levy that all of us who are paying for the diversion will at some point be assessed. I move to authorize county staff to work with the FM Diversion Authority and MetroCog to include the efforts identified by MetroCog with the design and construction work being done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, identify the funding gap needed, and authorize the Cass County to act as a political subdivision for a grant request for recreational features from the North Dakota Outdoor Heritage Fund.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Shirley.
Question, how is it determined, the surface of the trail?
That'll be something, thank you, Commissioner. That'll be something that, that we work with MetroCog on. Of course, funding would be would probably be one of the driving factors. I think at this point, if we could identify enough funding to incorporate a gravel trail and do the grading in association with the Corps of Engineers construction efforts, that would save the most money long term, where you're not trying to retrofit a trail system in. And the surfacing options could also be upgraded over the years as additional funding might be identified or pursued. So at this point, I think the thought is to have a gravel trail system with the intent of moving towards an asphalt or concrete at some point in the future.
This area is then be flooded during operation, right?
That's correct, Commissioner.
Thank you. Just
Further discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Breitling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Motion passes. Mr. Paulson, thank you for your patience, sir.
Thank you very much.
Item 5B, Cass County Highway update. I'm going to presume Mr. Benson or Mr. Wilson, do you want to jump on it?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll kick this off. Really an information / action today, really at your determination. Just an update for you on a matter involving K&B Properties LLC and Cass County that I believe you're all familiar with, located on County Highway 16. Again, this is a matter that has come before you a number of times, most recently at the commission meeting on July 21st. At that point, you directed myself and State's Attorney, Mr. Burdick, to draft a letter to council for K&B Properties with a number of specific requests and directives. That letter was drafted and delivered. We received a response to that on August 5th. The response has been provided for your review. Does not appear to address the specific issues raised and items requested, and there is a number of follow-up actions on the county's part that are suggested from the county's letter on July 22nd that would follow. Again, this is an update for the board to make you aware of the most recent communication. If you choose to provide some additional or different direction than we've previously received, but at a minimum, this was just to advise you of the communication that has been received since that last time that this matter was addressed by the board.
Commissioner Steen.
Mr. Wilson, what has changed with regard to this situation since our last meeting?
Well, I will defer to Mr. Benson if he wants to make any comments. My response to that would be that we had, the county had laid out a number of criteria and requested actions in a letter previous to the letter from July 22nd. And to my knowledge, not all of those requested actions have been followed through on.
So the answer would be, in your opinion, nothing has changed since our last meeting.
I don't know
as far
that
as the project.
I don't know that I would go so far as nothing, but have not been completed to the satisfaction of what was
Maybe
laid
Mr.
out in the original letter.
Benson can then add to that.
Mr. Benson, can you jump on?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Steen, to my knowledge, there has not been any action. Both accesses, the new access that was constructed with concrete and the existing farm or field access are both in place, and there's been no movement to do any work to remove one of the accesses or work to accomplish any of the items that we've requested.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Commissioner Pollock?
Well, what's your next step, Jason?
Commissioner Pollock, I think we've laid out the timeline, and if once we reach that timeline, we have, we'll do a last notification and then remove one of the accesses. I think we've had plenty of discussions, and again, it's been over 14 months since this was first brought to our attention, and he, I think we do have to enforce the fact that he put an access in without a permit. And just last Tuesday, I was at a Stanley Township meeting on a different item, and I was kind of somewhat blindsided by Mr. Bifford, who sits on the Stanley Township board. And one of the comments was made, well, it's just an extra access. And this was by another board member, that couldn't we just look the other way? and it's, I think it's our responsibility to maintain the standards that we expect, and that other people follow through with in constructing accesses along our corridors.
Commissioner Sherling?
Just to clarify, Jason, this individual is a member of the Stanley Township Board. So there's a potential conflict there. Assume he's self or whatever.
Self-dealing.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Sherling, yes, Mr. Bifford was elected, I believe a year and a half or so ago, just sometime prior to all of these issues arising.
Thank you.
Further discussion, Commissioner Brightly?
There were timelines set out in the most recent correspondence from Mr. Burdick, and those timelines have not yet been met. So we're to try to discuss it, or now, or decide what we're going to do is premature.
Hopefully our owner will act in good faith and respond to us in a timely fashion regarding what needs to be done. So. Mr. Wilson, Mr. Benson, anything further?
Here, more from me.
Nothing further from me, Mr. Chairman.
Any commissioners, any more questions? We will move on to 5C, Mr. Montplaisir, select the polling sites.
Good evening, Commissioners. Hopefully this is an easier subject than your previous ones. We've kind of laid out our election plans for November. What we're trying to do is provide options for people, and at the same time provide a method of keeping both the workers and the voters safe during this whole process. We have 6 sites that we can use. They're all rather large sites that we think will be able to socially distance people and allow them to vote safely. It allows a lot of hours of voting. We want to start the earliest we can under state law, which is the 19th of October, which is 15 days before the election. And of course, absentee voting will be a big part of this election. We've already got in just about 30,000 applications, and we're getting in more and more applications every day. So with that, I'd be willing to try to answer any questions.
I've heard nothing but good things about having voting in person, even though there's some risk to it, obviously, and if we can provide safety for our staff, that's my biggest concern. It sounds like we can, so I'm grateful for your work in this. Commissioner Sherling.
Thank you. So I think when I applied for the primary ballot, that I checked that I wanted both the primary and the general election ballot. I believe that that was an option. So if a person was in my situation and they wanted to double check, would they go to the Secretary of State's website? Would that be where you'd look, or how would you do that?
No, at this time you'd call our office because that's not uploaded to the Secretary of State site yet, because that election isn't created on their site until we have all the candidates and everything. But I just looked up yours, and yes, you're in line to get a ballot in November.
Well, thank you for that, but I hate to see you bombarded by phone calls.
Yes, I have been bombarded with those phone calls.
About as good an answer as you can get, Commissioner. Commissioner Pollak.
I move to approve the early voting / vote center locations, dates and hours as presented by the finance office.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Pollak?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Brightling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes. Motion passes. Anything else, Mr. Montplaisir?
Just to let you know, we are going to try to publicize this pretty heavily. If you looked at today's forum, you'll see, the start of that with an article in there. So we want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. Thank you.
More people that know, the better. Commissioners, any more questions for Mr. Montplaisir? If not, we'll move on to item 6, appointment of interim county coroner, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I will go into much greater detail if you like, but I will briefly, what I'm asking for is we are in the process of developing the job description and the PAQ for a full-time coroner position. We actually received the PAQ back from our consultant Gallagher on Friday, so we will be able to move forward with the advertising and the recruiting process on this very shortly. But as you know, we've received a letter of retirement from our Cass County coroner of the past 37 years, Dr. John Baird, effective as of the end of August. And we will not have the selection process completed by that point. So we are asking you to appoint Deputy Coroner Christy Ross as interim Cass County coroner effective September 1, 2020 through the appointment of a full-time Cass County coroner.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Sherling.
Thank you. So how wide a net do you plan on casting for your advertising for the position?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sherling, we plan to advertise and recruit this very similar to a department head position. And so that does involve both some locally, advertising locally as well as regionally with a number of different publications. I can't tell you specifically which ones we would use at this point, but we would look to advertise regionally as well as locally.
Okay, great, thank you. May I?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would move to appoint Ms. Christy Ross as interim Cass County coroner effective September 1 through appointment of a full-time Cass County.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Question. Commissioner Steen.
Just curious, under what you perceive as going to be the requirements for the county coroner, I'm assuming Ms. Ross will qualify.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Steen, yes. Yes, we're.
Further discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollak?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Brightling?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 7, coronavirus. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, at our last commission meeting on August 3rd, about a day and a half previous to that meeting, we had received notification from the state of a new allocation process for CARES Act funding passed federally in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And according to this new funding distribution process developed in cooperation between both the state, the League of Cities, and the Association of Counties, counties and municipalities would receive an allocation based on the number of licensed peace officers between the payroll for the number for licensed peace officers between March and September of this year. And at that point, we were still working off of an estimate and didn't know exactly what that figure was going to be. And your direction at that point was to come back with a more precise figure, as well as a refining cost estimates of the cost of mitigation, COVID-19 mitigation efforts to date, and really a spending plan moving forward with that updated information. So that's what you have in front of you as far as the CARES Act spending plan. We look like the total amount that Cass County will end up receiving through this distribution formula is a little over $4.3 million, minus roughly $300,000 represented by expenses accrued to date, leaving just a little over $4 million. Under remaining proposed projects are a number of different projects that were proposed in the initial application process only under the old system that we submitted to the North Dakota Office of Management and Budget back at the beginning of June. The one exception there is a new expense that would be IT related. That's been developed in coordination with IT Director Terry Schmaltz over the last week. And that really focuses on some of the infrastructure and hardware needs to support more online meetings, more bandwidth, and better firewall protection for the security of those meetings. All of these projects have been identified projects. We've refined the cost estimate on those. That's where we show the current total estimated projects. If you authorized proceeding with every one of them, that would be just over $950,000. And if you did choose to initiate every one of those projects, that would leave a remaining funding amount of just over $3 million. So, lot to take in, but that was what I felt the charge was from this body 2 weeks ago, and brought the spending plan back to you. Commissioner Brightland.
We have an August 12 memo from you describing.
Yes.
I received, I think forwarded by Heather, an email from Terry to you with different figures. Are they not included in this?
The numbers in blue.
I don't think they have that.
You don't have to call it.
Thank you. Commissioner Brightling, you're referring to this sheet here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're showing initially, Robert, is the 75. Presume that 75 is amended by these numbers, correct?
75 is now 150.
Correct.
Yep.
But that isn't what, you didn't reprint your memo, did you?
No.
No.
I did not. My apology. The updated memo, let me just show this for you. The updated memo should read that the IT equipment and infrastructure upgrades totals $150,000 rather than $75,000. That leaves a current total estimated projects amount.
$3,006,000.
Yes. Thank you.
So is it our mission today? Oops, I'm sorry, out of order.
Commissioner Pollak.
Is it our mission today to approve these expenditures?
Well, if I may, I think the answer to that is we should choose what we want to proceed with on this list, if not all of them, whichever ones we choose. And maybe that's not even I would direct, maybe overstepping my bounds here, but what I would do is I would direct the administrator and the building committee to proceed and get real numbers for these. I think we've got real numbers, Mr. Wilson, but just to refine, make sure, and then bring those back to the board so we know they're real. And then we need to have a dialogue in my mind regarding not finality today, but I think you open debate. I know it's getting late for all of us, but if not today, certainly by the next meeting, what we need to do with the 3.x, 3,060,000. So the answer is kind of. Commissioner.
Well, are any of these time sensitive?
Ideally, we accomplish them sooner rather than later because things like the negative airflow in the jail is a big deal because that creates safer cells for our inmates. So if it's not done in the next 10 minutes, no, but ideally we need to move on these things. Commissioner Sherling, then Commissioner Steen.
So one other item I'd like more consideration for is how does the jail input area fit into this? Or does is it partial? Or do we put it into the budget for 2022? I mean, it's an opportunity here and that's a need that we have. And how does that need stack up against these items?
I have an idea, but Commissioner Steen, you go first, sir.
Well, this came up in earlier discussion. I know way up early on this. I'm glad Mr. Montplaisir's on the horn yet here, but the question I have is a budget issue. We've preliminarily, I think, approved the 21 budget. I don't know if that be changed upward is my question for Mr. Montplaisir. Is that preliminary approval? Is that it?
Go down, but not up.
The mill levy can't be changed, but the budget can be changed going forward.
Not the mill levy, okay. I have no more questions on that one.
So from my perspective, well, you know what I'm thinking on this. What I would like to do is, now that there's no time constraints on us, so what we talked about during the sheriff's rotational was in part correct. I'm disputing what Mr. Wilson shared with you prior. The distribution of the CARES Act money was not a direct reimbursement for law enforcement. That's what I'm perceiving. It was a mechanism to distribute it equitably throughout the state, meaning it doesn't have to go just for law enforcement. And this is I'm not trying to pick on our friends in the small communities that are paying us for our school resource officers and supplementing through other means. It's not intended as a direct reimbursement for law enforcement. It's a mechanism, period. And I believe that's a quote, mechanism. So where we spend the money no longer matters. It gets spent, Commissioner Sherling's point, the dollars have to be allocated by the end of the year, which we're doing through the mechanism of law enforcement. So we're meeting all the laws, we're meeting the intent of the law. We get the money. It's essentially a gift to our general fund, which is how we fund law enforcement anyway. But what I would like to do is I would like to touch base with our architects and engineers. And you have to realize we were paying a premium for expediency. There was a massive dollar figure added on to the top of this project, because we had to be done by December. That means if I'm a CM, I'm going 24 hours a day. I'm doing temp heat, I'm doing temp light. I'm doing 2 shifts minimum. There's a massive cost of that. What is that massive cost? Don't know, but there's something more than there's a savings. I'll let you jump in a second, Mr. Wilson. There's a savings in my mind over speed versus figure it out when you want to. We need expediency for the sake of our friends like Andy Freibig, but it's not a be all end all. So what I would like to do, I would like to talk to our architects, engineers to say, what would it cost to complete the set of drawings so we have a real number? Because right now, I don't think we have a real number. We have an aggressive number. We have a safe number. And then we budget a portion of this. And I'd like to go down. I'd take half a mil off and go for the tax credit. We'd still leave us with $2.5-ish million that we then dedicate towards this and figure out next year, so 22, how to pay for the other $2-ish million that we're short. So that's what I would like to do. But Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just to clarify, there has been an effort to, at the very least, I would say, refine those numbers under the remaining projects in the last 2 weeks. So not to counter your point that if we went back and asked them to actually build out the drawings for the courtroom projects, for example, would we get that number even tighter? Yes, we probably would. But in the last 2 weeks, we have gone back and verified the numbers that are listed here, and at least been able to bring a additional level of certainty in total cost, total project cost, fees to this list that is laid out here. And some of them on the the ITV
items that's verifying with Mr. Schmaltz, is this number still good? Yes. Some of these others with, again, the courtroom work that is going back to the architects and saying, okay, if we don't have to build these on the tight time frame that we had originally envisioned, what is your best cost estimate? And so I just want to make that clear that of the effort that has been brought back to date. Commissioner Shirley or Commissioner Riley.
I gather what you really are asking for is a motion to verify not only those on the August 12 memo, but also the jail.
That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to basically essentially proceed with this list as presented and work with our administrator and I guess Gene too, right? So our facility director too, and then building committee to get this done. And then talk to the architects and engineers and find out what the real price is. And if it's, boy, we think, and I think we've had a pretty good dialogue with our architects and engineers. I think we can sit down with them, virtually sit down with them over the phone and say, what was your premium on this? Was it 10%, 12%? What was your premium? And he'll come back and say, oh, so I put $500,000 on top to be safe because I knew we'd be pressing our guys. Okay, so what would it cost you to finish your drawings and bid these in January to get an actual number, or even some, whatever the commission wishes, to get a real number so we can actually budget appropriately. Because right now, the number we turned into the state was a big number, so we knew we were safe. Because the last thing I wanted us to have happen is the numbers come in at 7.2 million and we're 750 short. So we come in at 5, well, we asked for 6.2.
Who's your design firm?
Scott Fettig, what's their firm name?
For the jail intake, yeah.
Why wouldn't you use the people who designed the jail?
Well, we did. I mean, so, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we had numerous conversations about that when we went back and looked at the space needs study that preceded this. And I want to say that either the individual architect who did that work is no longer working or no longer available. And so we were not able to go back to, if you will, the original source.
So essentially what's happened is Foss's team, with the exception of Shelley, I think Shelley's still over there. Foss's team isn't there anymore. Plus Fettig did the original scope of work for us. So we did interview Foss, Terry Stroh. This goes back a year or more ago on the initial preliminary sketches. So logically, I guess, I reinvent the wheel. We hired the same firm that did the preliminary work. Does that make sense? So we did, the point is we did interview Foss, Terry Stroh, and who else? JLG. Anyway,
there's another firm out of the cities too.
And as I understood, first I asked the question if it was time sensitive. I got the impression that we weren't going to approve anything. But now I'm hearing to approve the items listed under remaining proposed projects. No?
My motion.
Why would, oh, is there a motion?
Would be that we authorize our staff to firm up those numbers and also to get a quality number for the jail and come back to this board with those figures, because we're not on a time deadline.
I don't think it needs a motion. I just think it's the directive that he's gotten.
That's my motion.
You're moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, you don't need any clarification, do you? You're not? Thank you. Okay. Any discussion? If not?
I need clarification of the motion, please.
Mr. Bartley, you want to restate it, or I can? You can.
Go ahead.
Your motion. To work with staff and to get these numbers pinned down, as well as, and use your discretion, Heather, get these numbers pinned down, as well as enter negotiations, or at least discussion dialogue with the architect of record or the intake at the jail to get a real number or refine the number that we were given based on the fact that we no longer have a critical time path to follow. That'll save us fees. That'll save everything. So, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. There's no, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Mr. Wilson, we good?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, keep going on.
Members of the board, very, very quickly, just a couple of other updates I wanted to provide to you.
Sorry.
Our office had a number of questions as different school systems are getting back to returning to class in a number of different forms, whether that's in person, a hybrid model, and we've been asked what accommodations we might make for employees who are parents of school-age children who may not have other options. And there is a provision within the Federal CARES Act that requires provision of emergency paid leave up to 480 hours for COVID-19 related absences. So we were going to look to just follow the law there, and we are in doing so. We're going to make every attempt to allow employees to be productive from home if needed, or to allow them to be productive in remote ways if that's needed. Very similar to what we have done throughout this process. But it's a question that has come up to us and been renewed as we're getting into the school system. And so we just want to be consistent in our message, and really what we're proposing here is essentially what we're required to do by the CARES Act. So that was one update. Certainly would take any questions, but just the second point I wanted to remind you of is that there was a renewed effort last week to emphasize the value of masks. And mask one that I was wearing until one of the straps broke on it. But that we do have a mask policy in place for staff and visitors, and we are just wanted to point that out, that is available to staff and visitors, and has been. I believe that was utilized back in. If it wasn't the end of March, it was very early April.
And so are masks being distributed at the front door?
Yes. Yes.
Anything further, sir?
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Wilson?
We still anticipate a second round of funding for the last 5 months of the year?
I think that would be a question of what comes out of federal legislation. I think from the state allocation, Chair Peterson might be a better position.
I can speak to that. So with the Association of Counties, we're still lobbying, and so is League of Cities for that matter. This last round, the 2 executive orders that Trump signed were in response to, I see Mr. Montplaisir's hand. I'll get you in a second, Mr. Montplaisir. 2 executive orders were signed in deference to the lack of congressional action, because within that supposed action that was supposed to transpire was direct funding circumventing what we just went through with the state. So what they'd be doing, and they talk about per capita, they talked about the number of formulas to get it down to us, but we skipped the allocation to the state of North Dakota and would go directly to counties and cities, and it's for billions of dollars. That's still, as Mr. Wilson said, still being pushed back and forth. I don't know if they're going to litigate regarding his executive orders or not, but really my gut's telling me something will come to us. I don't think it's going to be as substantive as the money we just got, maybe half, maybe a third, but it should come directly to the counties and directly to the cities. And I'm going to guess on per capita. Commissioners, anything further? Mr. Brightling, anything further? Mr. Montplaisir.
Just kind of an update. The $4.3 million that has been reported to you is for 5 months of salaries of law enforcement and benefits. We will be filing a supplemental report in October for August and September. That was what the agreement was with the OMB. So that should total another $1.7 million, giving our $800 and some thousand a month spend on law enforcement salaries. So that request will be made in October. Now, whether or not the state will have enough money to reimburse that entire amount, I don't know, but that's what our request will be.
Any further questions? If not, vouchers, Commissioner Pollock.
I move approval of the vouchers.
There, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Discussion, if not, roll call, please.
Commissioner Breitling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Motion passes. Committee reports, Mr. Wilson.
No report.
Holy cow, Commissioner Breitling.
No report.
Commissioner Sherling.
No report.
Mr. Burdick's office, I don't think Tracy's still on. Ms. Peters.
Yep, I'm still here, and I don't have anything either. Thank you.
Commissioner Pollock.
Two things, both comments. Speed limit raise for Cass County highways. When will we see that on the agenda for a hearing?
Not to presuppose things, maybe Mr. Benson's still hanging on. I would propose that comes through highway, and then as a recommendation.
We already did that.
We made a recommendation from highway.
Not to increase.
I'd like to see it on the agenda.
Recommendation to increase speeds.
Well, I was thinking bigger picture, because a couple of years ago, we had them come through and do a whole study on everything. I thought this was just one road, maybe not.
I think it was two roads.
I'm thinking bigger picture than I guess. I thought.
I think we should notify the public that it's our intent to do that and give them an opportunity to say yay or nay.
Okay. Mr. Benson, are you still on? He's not. Mr. Wilson, get word to Mr. Benson.
I think he's texting him right now.
Okay, but anyway, I'd sure like to see that on the agenda. And the other thing is, I'm disappointed in the way we set up this room, because if we're going to be preaching social distancing, and if I'm going to be wearing a mask, and if they're going to be asked to put a mask on when they come in, then we let everybody all sit together here. I mean, we can do it better. And what I would do is I would get rid of all the extra chairs that are here, even if they have to sit out in the hall, and I would space the chairs so that it's an acceptable layout that can accommodate some people to the maximum degree that we can safely do so. But I don't feel good about asking the public to come to a meeting and not giving them what the CDC says is the safe way to be.
Did I say something, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
I had everything all set up, and they came in, and you can tell people, because I've told people we want you to be socially distanced, and they move together.
Well, yeah, but there was one chair here, and then, I mean, there was only room for 6 people. And after the seventh person came, that's when they started moving them around.
Move the chairs out, we can do that, but if you're gonna tell somebody to stay socially distanced, that they still are gonna sit together, what are you gonna do?
Well, maybe they came together.
They did come together.
Family.
They did come together, and the thing is you can tell them, we're trying to socially distance, so please move, but if they're not gonna move, because I know that I've said that to people, and they don't move. So, just telling you, trying to be.
Thank you. End of my report, even though it wasn't a report.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen.
Nothing as deep as that, just a comment. I think a couple meetings ago, I indicated I was appointed as treasurer for the Fargo Dome, and with reorganization, I got actually put onto the finance committee finally, and now I am chair of the finance committee as well. Fargo Dome.
Oh, so they put you on when they have their first deficit in the history of the Dome.
This is going to be a great year.
$26 million reserve. What a wonderful place.
Any further, Mr. Steen? Mr. Montplaisir.
Just that I hope Mr. Steen doesn't expect the county to make up the whole deficit when they use the dome as a polling place.
No, we've got about 40-some million in the reserves. We'll be good.
Yeah, cash. Mr. Montplaisir, anything else?
That's it.
Can you touch on the email that we received from West Fargo regarding their airport? Is this prudent?
Sure. We received an email from the West Fargo City Commission, actually the city administrator, to see if the county would be interested in taking over funding a mill levy or something for the West Fargo airport. I responded that I think that would be a hard sell, since we also have airports in Fargo, Kindred, and Castleton, who would then also want to be supported, and how would we how could we afford that and how would we allocate funds, that sort of thing?
Just so everybody knew that happened. We've not responded, Mr. Rumpleasure, I think did a yeoman's work saying, yeah, how would we deal with everyone else? So if anyone asks you, that's what happened. Anything else, Mr. Rumpleasure?
That's it.
Okay, we all have meetings, that's my report. So with that, we have correspondence.
There is no correspondence.
There, for a second. We stand adjourned. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you again for your members' patience.
Very good, thank you.
Away we go.
Good job, Rick.
Joseph.